Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about What If Naruto Brother of Sirzechs Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for Part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. If asked, Naruto's family would find it difficult to give any specifics about Naruto in any capacity. This would be because in the first 10 years of his life he was almost completely overshadowed by his twin sister, Rias Gremory. This wasn't completely without reason though, as Rias' latent power gained through her mother's side of the family. The power of destruction had shown very early in her life, and many of her family members dedicated all their free hours to helping her master it. They had spent far too much money on property reconstruction and renovation. In the present day, a 10-year-old Naruto stared at his older brother, Sirzechs Lucifer, in confusion. Standing at 4 feet 7 inches, his spiky blood-red hair tilting slightly with his head while his purple eyes, reminiscent of his mother, sparkled in confusion. In his hands he held a thick book, and he was in track pants and a short-sleeved shirt with a collar that had a splotch of ink on it. "What is this?" Naruto asked in confusion, his soft voice thick with confusion. In front of him stood a nervously shuffling blonde girl around the same age as him, wearing a fairly dirty and torn kimono. Oh, did I forget to mention the fox ears and one fluffy tail she also had? "I got her so that she could be your first peerage member," Sirzechs said cheerily to try and mask his nervousness at nearly forgetting about his only brother while getting his sister, and rare and hopefully powerful Nekishu, for her peerage. Of course the current Lucifer did feel bad about that. And giving his brother a one-tailed kitsune in such a condition due to being the only one he could find on such a short notice that fit his criteria. Hello, coughing lightly and trying to conceal her blush, she continued. "I am Natsumi. It is nice to meet you. I hope to be a good member of your peerage," she said respectfully, even while fidgeting slightly. Naruto looked over the girl and her dirty appearance. Rummaging through his pocket, he found what he was looking for and grabbed out a queen piece. Sirzechs looked at his brother in surprise. For a one-tailed kitsune, he thought his brother would go with a pawn, not a queen. Still speaking in a soft tone, he instructed Natsumi on what to do and resurrected her into his queen. After the piece was absorbed into her body, he helped her onto her feet, and with a brief nod to his brother, led her to his room in a far corner of the second floor, and closed the door behind them. Looking around in astonishment, Natsumi noticed the amount of space and how many books and scrolls lined the walls. On one far wall was what appeared to be a study desk with papers and random trinkets such as small stones and medallions. Moving closer to get a better look to satisfy her curiosity, she noted how his handwriting looked both messy and organized at the same time. "This is my notes on the differences between iron from the human world and the underworld. I am interested to see if there are any developments." Naruto's voice sounded out from beside her, the sudden appearance making her yelp and jump back. Staring at her quizzically, he held out a pair of safety goggles. "Would you like to help?" Blushing in embarrassment at her earlier reactions, she meekly nodded and grabbed the plastic glasses. Grafia Lucifage was an extremely beautiful silver-haired devil, the strongest queen of any peerage and wife of Sirzechs Lucifer. She wore a very form-fitting maid's outfit, as she saw herself as a maid for Sirzechs. Quirking an eyebrow as her husband and king teleported into his office, she spoke up. "How did he take your gift?" she asked respectfully as he sat down. Noticing his confused expression almost instantly, she spoke up. "Is everything okay, Sirzechs-sama?" "Why would he use a queen piece on a one-tailed kitsune?" Sirzechs mumbled to himself. Grafia froze in the middle of pouring tea for her king, and though she did quickly recover, she thanked her lucky stars that he didn't notice, and only moments after placing a cup of tea in front of him, excused herself and left the room, heading quickly, but formally and properly, to Naruto's room. "Sirzechs-sama may have stopped me from training Rias' queen piece, but nothing was said about Naruto-sama's. I will make sure she is a queen worthy of a Satan's brother," Grafia thought as she reached Naruto's room. Standing up straight, she politely knocked on her door and heard a feminine voice mutter something similar to "I'll get it," and then the door opened to show a short blonde kitsune girl who seemed intimidated by her presence. "See, can I help you?" she tried to ask politely, but her own shyness made it seem a bit less polite than she may have been going for. "That's good. A solid base for me to work with," Grafia mumbled to herself. "Greetings. I am the queen of Naruto-sama's older brother. Do you happen to know that Naruto-sama's brother is a very important figure to Devilkind?" Natsumi meekly nodded. "And that Naruto-sama himself is from a very influential family?" Natsumi nodded again, but this time less confidently in her knowledge. "Due to these factors, I would like to teach you how to be a proper queen for Naruto-sama. I will also be training you to grow stronger physically, mentally and magically as well, so that you can be the best queen possible," Grafia said, offering to teach the young girl. When the young girl opened her mouth to reply, the silver-haired queen quickly held a hand up to stop her. "Discuss the offer with your king first. That is my first lesson," Grafia instructed. Nodding in confirmation, the kitsune girl shut the door, and after a minute or two of mumbled words that Grafia couldn't make out, the door opened again to show not only Natsumi but also Naruto. "Naruto-sama, I believe you have heard of the offer I gave your queen?" Grafia asked as she mentally took note of Natsumi's nervous shuffling at being stuck between her king and the intimidating queen. "I have. I certainly wasn't expecting the proposal, but I have no problem handing Natsumi to you occasionally." "How often do you believe you can train Natsumi?" the soft-spoken boy asked. "Once every 2 to 4 weeks for 24 hours at a maximum. Though I am pleasantly surprised you agreed so easily," Naruto-sama, Grafia commented. "Yes, well, I have seen how a queen can act when given complete freedom and absolutely no discipline," Naruto said, thinking about his sister's queen, Akino. Grafia nodded silently, knowing the girl in question that he was referring to, while poor Natsumi looked subtly between the two in confusion. "I currently have no duties for the next 12 hours of the day. If you do not mind, I can begin Natsumi's training immediately," Grafia supplied. Upon receiving a nod from Naruto, she silently led Natsumi away from the boy's room while said boy went back inside. Arriving at a small meadow outside the Gremory mansion, Grafia had Natsumi stand in front of her while she used a basic spell she had learnt long ago to summon a magic chalk. Said item allowing her to write on the air like it was a solid surface. "Now Natsumi, I understand that at first these lessons may seem intimidating, but eventually you will thank me for making you a worthy queen." Grafia started off the lesson, continuing as the kitsune girl nervously nodded. "Now, how much do you understand about being a queen to a devil peerage?" Grafia inquired. Gulping in nervousness, she spoke up, "And not much, Grafia-sama." She internally berated herself for the stutter. "Understood. A queen is a king's right hand, their ultimate partner, and their closest confidant. The traditional structure of a peerage that many devils have already forgotten is that each piece holds an important place, especially in combat. Within combat, the pieces work as such. Pawns are generally, but not always, the quantity over quality warriors, but can also act as secret trump cards if necessary. They are the most adaptable piece. The rook is the tank of a peerage. They can receive and deliver high amounts of physical and magical damage, though this increased strength means a decrease in speed and agility. Knights, on the other hand, suffer from the inverse problem. They have increased speed and agility, but other than that their physical capabilities are lackluster. Bishops are the mages of a peerage. Their magical abilities are increased while their physical capabilities are kept the same or decreased to compensate." Pausing to make sure Natsumi was listening, she continued, "Finally, the queen piece, you and I. We have all of the increased attributes of the rook, knight, and bishop, though in exchange for having all of the abilities increased, they are increased to a lower level than an individual piece. An example is if a queen and rook have equal physical strength before being reincarnated. After they reincarnate, they will both have increased strength, but the rook will be far stronger," Grafia explained, looking toward Natsumi to make sure she understood. Natsumi nodded as she stared at the floating words that Grafia had written while explaining, as she tried to commit them to memory. Though she did notice that as Grafia explained these things, she seemed to genuinely enjoy doing so. A small smile now stuck on her features. "Now, as Naruto-sama's right hand, you will be in charge of his general well-being, but also making sure that he is disciplined and does his work. If you're lucky, he will be the opposite of Sirzechs-sama and do his work without several severe consequences, though if by chance Naruto-sama is the same, I will teach you how to adequately deal with his lack of motivation. This is a generally well-working method, and there are others. Though I won't teach you about some until you're older," Grafia instructed, getting a shy nod from the girl. "Now stand up." Natsumi scrambled to her feet. "The first thing we will be working on is your confidence." Natsumi gulped as Grafia's eyes twinkled. The next day, Natsumi walked into Naruto's room with ruffled clothes and hair, something which she scowled internally at. Her hair was supposed to be beautiful and fluffy, damn it. Only to see him sitting at his desk in the corner of his room with his feet propped up on his desk while writing in a notebook, apparently having not noticed her entrance. "And Naruto-sama?" At her hesitant stutter, she cursed but had to stifle a giggle as Naruto jumped in shock and nearly fell out of his chair and quickly took his feet off his desk. "Ah, Natsumi, you're back," he said softly as he tried to squash down the embarrassed blush that sprang up from her seeing him so informal. Indeed, Grafia-san had to go back to her duties. She spoke, trying to stand up straight and speak professionally like Grafia taught her to. Naruto smiled lightly when he realized that Grafia had already imprinted slightly onto Natsumi. "You don't need to be so formal. I may be your king, but you're also my right hand, aren't you?" he asked while smiling slightly and tilting his head to the side. Natsumi yelped slightly as a large blush lit up her face as he did this. "I will try not to be so formal. But may I ask you, do the same?" Grafia-san said, "I am supposed to be your greatest confidant," she stuttered with a bright red face. "An eye for an eye?" Naruto questioned and nodded. "I can try to do that. Would you like to help?" he asked as he held up his notebook. Walking over to him, Natsumi saw the page was full of names of different supernatural species from around the world. What is this for Naruto-sama? She questioned as she tried to smooth down her hair and fur so that she would look more presentable. I'm looking at potential new members for my peerage. Natsumi's eyes widened at that. And may I please borrow the notebook, Naruto-sama? I would like to research the species. Why you are looking at. Getting a gentle smile in return, she felt the notebook rest in her palms, and grabbing it carefully she smiled in return and began walking out of his room to visit the Gremory library. Please try to avoid my sister's Queen Akino. She's around our age with long black hair and purple eyes. She's a bad influence. Natsumi nodded and softly closed the door behind her. She quickly made her way to the library after having the embarrassingly ask a maid for guidance. Her features set in stone, she was a girl on a mission. She would, years later, thank Grafia for not only instilling a strong protectiveness for her king but also for teaching her one of the most important lessons she would learn as a queen. She was Naruto's first and last line of defense, and she would burn before she failed him. Naruto sighed lowly as he scratched out a small paragraph he had written in his notebook, a new one as Natsumi was still holed up in the library after 4 hours. As he looked down at his desk and the sparking medallion that he had tried to research, the eye of Horus that on the medallion now had multiple cracks, even though the medallion itself was undamaged. The red-haired boy sighed in annoyance as he threw the medallion in a small trash can next to his desk and angrily ruffled his own hair before snapping the notebook shut and placing it on his desk and standing up. I can't believe I broke it. An eye of Horus medallion, Naruto grumbled to himself as he walked out of his room, not having any particular location in mind as he walked through the halls. It took forever to get that medallion. I wanted to see if I could analyze it some more, he griped to himself. As he walked down the marble halls of his family's estate, he heard a quiet curse and quirk an eyebrow. As he walked towards the room, he became even more intrigued as he realized it was his father's office, and that it was his father himself who cursed. Trying to peek into the office, he cursed as he accidentally knocked it, and froze in unexplainable fear as his father swung the door open with an annoyed expression before it softened, as he noticed it was his son. Looking down, he felt a twinge of guilt, not only at the slightly fearful expression his son was sporting, the one a child wore when they were caught snooping where they shouldn't, but also because he realized that he had spent so much time as Lord Gremory that he had forgotten to be Sirzechs Gremory around his kids. With a heavy sigh, he smiled down at Naruto and inwardly groaned in relief as Naruto's fearful expression melted away as he awkwardly shuffled into the large office which he could only remember clearly being in once, and could vaguely remember a few other occasions when he was younger. Looking around subtly, for a 10-year-old, he sat in the chair and fidgeted nervously, having not been around his father privately for well over 2 years at this point. With a sigh, Sirzechs spoke up. I assume you heard my outburst, he began formally. I did. Naruto spoke softly as he tried not to stutter in front of his father. I assume you would like to know why. Upon receiving a nod, the older man breathed out. I just realized that the lands we had been building warehouses on to store supplies are too close to the border of our territory for my liking, and now I have to fund building new warehouses and the moving of all the supplies closer to the capital of our territory. So to speak, he explained to his son, who took a few more moments to process what his father had been saying before trying to look at the map from his sitting position. Sirzechs couldn't help it and let a few chuckles escape before clicking his fingers and using a simple spell to make the map levitate beside him so that Naruto could see it. Naruto meanwhile was amazed at the ease that his father used the spell. Granted, it was a simple one that even he could do quickly, but his father activated it instantly. Staring at the map for a few moments after snapping out of his thoughts, he suddenly cocked his head to the side as a thought popped into his mind. What's happening to the old warehouses? He asked innocently. They'll have to be abandoned, unfortunately. Luckily, these weren't the heavy-duty warehouses we have by our house. Those cost a small fortune, the older man griped. See, could I use them? Upon realizing that he had stuttered in front of his father, during one of the very few times he had actually spent quality time with him as well, he sat ramrod straight, and somehow managed to both pale and turn as red as his hair. What would you use them for? He asked his son sharply, wanting to know what his son had in mind, but at the flinch he caused in his son he realized he had said it a tad too sharply. I don't know. I just didn't want it to go to waste, he stuttered as he tried to keep his composure in front of his family, the voices of some of his old teachers ringing in his head that the Gremorys were a very influential family, and had to be composed at all times. Sirzechs' eyes softened, and he felt his heart tug as he watched his son struggle to keep his composure. Standing up and walking over to Naruto, he went to ruffle his hair comfortingly before freezing and drawing his hand back as a hitch in Naruto's breathing sent a pang of guilt through his system. I'll let you use them. Do you promise not to do anything bad? He asked in a somewhat jovial tone, trying to lighten the mood, but his face fell when he realized that Naruto thought he was being completely serious. I promise I won't. He stuttered as he slowly began to gather his composure back. Okay, I'll talk to you later about it, alright? I think Rias has Sona over for a playdate. Why don't you go say hi? He suggested, his smile straining as Naruto rushed out of the room as fast as he could while trying to act formal. As the door closed, Sirzechs dropped into the chair Naruto had just been sitting in, and sighed loudly while placing a hand over his face and looking at the ceiling. Father of the century, he mentally drawled, and as his gaze leveled back to his desk he glared at his work like it had personally destroyed everything he cared for. In front of Rias' room Naruto stood, having used the trek over from his father's office to calm down, and calmly knocked on the fancy wooden door. After a second Rias opened the door, and upon realizing it was him standing before her, looked at him in confusion. For his credit, Naruto withstood Rias' scrutiny without any visible effect, but what got to him was the glint in Akino's eye that, even having only known her for 4 months, still sent shivers down his spine. Naruto? What are you doing here? Aren't you usually holed up in your room? She asked/teased, and at Naruto's grumbling and indignant glare giggled. I stopped by to see you. Father suggested it would be a good idea. None of the 3 girls noticed the hitch as he spoke about their father. Rias scowled and tapped her foot angrily. Well, be careful. Father has horrible judgment about what is and isn't good. Having seen the tantrum that went with this line of thought, Naruto wisely stayed silent, though unfortunately Sona didn't get the memo. Even if Razor is deplorable, it is still a very important marriage, she commented, and the speed that Rias rounded on her made Akino and Sona jump. Says you. You and Naruto managed to get out of yours because you beat him at a chess game. I don't have that lucky break, she yelled. Rias tried to calm down, Sona said calmly, a drop of sweat trailing down her cheek as a red aura started surrounding Rias. Calm down. I have to marry that pig, and unlike you, miss, my parents care about my feelings, mine don't. I'll be stuck in a stupid loveless marriage and lose my position as clan heir, she screamed as her aura started to slowly eat away at everything around her. Naruto slowly stepped back so he was well clear of her red aura, and upon hearing Akino warn Rias that she was about to destroy her favorite teddy, followed by the sound of tearing and an angry scream, he ducked for cover behind a nearby corner right before a red explosion lit up the hallway and Rias' room. Peeking his head from around the corner, he looked on in amazement at the destruction Rias caused with her emotional outburst. Rias' room was now only sporting 3 walls and half a ceiling, while the doorway had been expanded greatly. All 3 girls that were in the room were covered in soot and destroyed items. As Akino and Sona comforted Rias, Naruto watched a dozen or so maids and butlers run over and marvel at the destruction Rias caused. The power of destruction is amazing. Look at the damage Rias-sama can already do with it, one maid commented dryly as the one next to her laughed nervously. At the sound of grinding, Naruto realized that he had gritted his teeth so much that he had begun to grind them against each other. Sparing one last glance at the remnants of Rias' room, he turned on his heel and left. The maid's comment having brought back a slight anger he had towards the pod. Okay, it was more than slight. He loathed the Bale clan's familial ability due to the fact that even having it instantly put a devil at high class due to the fact that it destroys something to the atomic level. By no means did he hate the people who used it. He knew for a fact that his older brother had trained himself to the point that his own pod could deconstruct other pod by the time he was 30, and he could respect that. Opening the door to his room and quickly closing it behind him, he grabbed the Eye of Horus medallion from the bin again and sat at his desk. Placing it on the table, he opened his notebook and began writing down notes, before grabbing some safety glasses and placing them on before making sure he had memorized the symbol of Horus. Stretching his arms out in front of him, he placed his hands together and started channeling his magic into them. As he did so, he began slowly opening them to show a sandy yellow magic circle with the Eye of Horus in the middle instead of the Gremory clan sigil. Grinning a little to himself, he kept going before his eyes widened as the magic circle seemed to glitch before fizzling away, the action burning his palms. Hissing in pain, he sat back at his table and opened his notebook, writing down in big bold letters. Study magic circles before trying to make a new one. Hissing in pain and dropping his pencil as he straightened out his palms, he heard a knock on his door. Standing up, he walked over and took great pain to only use his fingers to open the door. Standing before him was a beaming Natsumi. Moving to the side of the doorway and allowing her in, he closed the door behind her and sat at his desk chair. Naruto-sama. I found some species I believe would be best for certain roles. I hope you find the information useful, she said, starting out confidently before becoming more meek and bashfully handing the notebook she was holding back to him. Wincing in pain, as to move the pages he had to bend his palms, he flicked to the last pages with writing on them to see where she had taken notes, and what she had written down. This is very well written, he murmured, though Natsumi with her enhanced hearing heard and beamed once again. I'll see if we can go after one of these species soon, but first, he said, closing the notebook and placing it on his desk before showing her his burnt palms, which had now swollen slightly and her an angry, pulsing red. Do you happen to know any healing magic? Natsume's fox ear twitched as she glared lowly at the two new peerage members that Naruto had gotten a few days ago. A female wolf spirit, who ended up becoming his knight, a year younger than her and Naruto with silver hair and fur, and a male human, who was also a knight with a sacred gear that allowed him to channel lightning through anything he touched, that had brown hair and onyx eyes. As far as sacred gears went, it was no Longinus, but it wasn't exactly weak either. Apologies, Naruto-sama, the new knight spat with a hard glare as he accidentally spilled tea over Naruto's notebook. Naruto sighed at the barely concealed hatred that Ken had towards him. He just couldn't understand where it had come from, though. He had reincarnated both him and Sayuri when they were near death due to malnutrition and injuries. Though while Sayuri seemed to be thankful, Ken absolutely despises him. Ken, can you go get me a towel? He asked softly, and with a scoff the brown-haired boy turned on his heel and walked out of the room. Hearing Natsume walk up next to him and let out an uncharacteristic snort, he tilted his head back to look at the girl. Upon doing so, he raised an eyebrow as she blushed a fairly solid shade of red and tried to stand straighter and appear more proper like Graphia. Do you understand his behavior? He asked the girl softly, Ken's attitude obviously weighing heavily on his mind. Sadly I don't, and Naruto-sama, she mumbled, staring at the door intensely even with her nervous stutter. Naruto grunted and stood up while flicking through his notebook, trying to see the damage the spilt tea had caused before growling in anger and throwing the now ruined book in the bin next to his desk, flicking his hand after doing so to try and get some of the tea off of it. I spent weeks on that research, he mumbled dejectedly. Natsume, upon seeing his slightly dejected expression, growled lowly in her throat before going to grab his hand. Unfortunately, before she could, a sudden bout of nervousness made her flinch back before she did so and coughed lightly to get his attention instead. I believe Vanillana-sama will be calling you for dinner soon. Would you like me to go get Sayuri-san and Ken as well? She asked, and at Naruto's nod she left the room in search of the two knights. After asking around for some maids who had giggled mysteriously when she had said that Naruto-sama would like them to join at dinner, she eventually found Sayuri doing some training drills in a garden just outside the mansion. As Sayuri-san, dinner is ready. And Naruto-sama wanted me to come tell you. Do you know the way? She asked the wolf spirit who stepped into her personal space and took a deep whiff of her. Blushing as red as her master's hair, Natsume only managed to stutter out something unintelligible in embarrassment before Sayuri stood back to her full height and grinned roguishly with a wink. I know how to find him now, thanks for the help, Taicho, she stated confidently as she sauntered away from the nearly overheating Kitsune girl. Puffing up her cheeks in embarrassment, she made her way to where she knew Ken would be from the 8 or so other times that he pulled this particular stunt. Said stunt being that he would say that he would do something for Naruto and then completely blow off the task and go to the library. Reaching the library, she walked in without reservation and saw Ken nose deep in a book as usual, though for some reason the amount of books surrounding devil anatomy and peerages filled her with concern. Stomping her foot to get his attention, she smiled far too innocently. Those are some interesting books you're reading. Those topics catch your interest? She asked innocently, her typical nervous stutter seemingly obliterated as she stood alone in the library with the boy. Oh? It's the Shy Queen. Tell me, do you even remember who you were before that devil forced this personality on you? He asked nastily as he stood up, and Natsume felt her smile strain. I'm afraid I don't know what you mean, Ken, she began innocently, tapping her bottom lip with her finger in an action she had seen Rias do at dinner 2 days ago. Of course you don't, he spat angrily. Must be his devil magic. Probably too strong for your pathetic mind to handle, he snarled in anger. Are you trying to say that Naruto-sama has brainwashed me for his own benefit? She asked, unknowingly beginning to release the barest amount of killing intent, Ki. Of course. He's a devil. He forced us to become devils as well. Are you saying you wanted that? You wanted to become something hated by everything in existence. To be forced to become the personification of evil for some twisted asshole's own agendas. He yelled at the queen, whose smile dropped off of her face and left 2 frozen golden glaciers in place of her eyes. I'd be careful how you speak about Naruto-sama. Old devils were like that, but not him. He didn't save you for such purposes. Though he shouldn't have saved you at all, she spoke in a frosty tone that spoke of imminent danger. Ken ignored that and grabbed a plain kitchen knife out of his pocket, a fairly weak electrical current pulsing to life around it as he glared at the Kitsune girl. Said Kitsune girl coating in her hands in a dark red flame that all Kitsune knew instinctually, Kitsune Bai, and glared right back at the boy. As things were just about to come to blows, a maid stepped in before jumping in fright and yelping loudly, causing both of them to shut off their powers and turn towards the frightened maid. Natsume blushed as she realized what she had just been caught doing. LLL Lord Gigi Gremory S says dinner is ready, the poor maid chattered out in fear. With a snarl, Ken stomped past the terrified maid while Natsumi quickly followed, sending an apologetic look towards the maid and then following straight after Ken, standing right behind him and watching his every move with careful eyes. Naruto looked subtly between Natsumi and Ken, as even with his limited social skills he could feel the animosity between the two and sighed as his family kept staring at him, the stares making him shrink into his seat. As much as he wished for more time with his family, this was too much for the young boy. Ah, Naruto-kun, Venelana spoke up and internally sighed as her son's head snapped in her direction with a confused look. Your father and I have been speaking, and tomorrow we'll be taking you and Rias and your peerages to get your familiars. Naruto sat stock still, his features stuck on a mixture of confusion, surprise and elation, while Rias stood up and whooped in joy. Natsumi giggled at her master and his sister's reaction. Turning towards her newest peerage ally, she snickered at Sayuri's plain, confused expression. Ken's reaction, though, sapped all of her joy from her, as her enhanced eyesight took notice of his elated expression and the darkening of his eyes as they passed over Naruto. A large knot formed in her stomach, and she knew then, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that she couldn't allow him to become any stronger. If he even thought about harming Naruto, the boy who gave her a home, a pseudo-family, the chance to be trained from one of the strongest females in existence, and the chance to help others like her, if he even thought about harming Naruto, she would destroy him down to the last cell. Naruto looked around the familiar forest with a childish sense of awe, hidden under a layer of thin composure, but it was still there. Rias, Akino, and Sayuri just had plain childish awe. Kaneko looked around with a blank look on her face, and while Natsumi and Ken did marvel and awe, one was busy trying to think of the strongest familiar he could possibly get, while the other was thinking of protecting Naruto from Ken. Rias-sama and her peerage will be going with Sirzechs-sama, who insisted he come to watch Rias get he familiar, Grafia explained to the group of kids. Naruto felt his odd feelings slowly die away like a deflating balloon until it disappeared. Sirzechs seems to have noticed Naruto's unhappy mood and nervously chuckled and waved at the boy, who kept his face perfectly non-expressive as he turned back to Grafia. While I will be taking Naruto-sama and his peerage to look for their familiars, Grafia finished and nodded to the peerage in question, who followed after her, Natsumi being careful to place herself between Ken and Naruto at all times. Of course, no matter how subtle any of them were, they were still children, and Grafia could see the tension like it wasn't masked at all. As Grafia sidled up next to Natsumi to speak to her, she froze. Boom! Snapping her head upwards, the silver-haired maid raised an eyebrow as she noticed storm clouds quickly covering the sky above them and swirling around a central point above Ken. In an instantaneous flash of lightning, the five devils were greeted by the sight of a bird covered in lightning flapping right in front of Ken, staring directly into the young boy's eyes as the very air around it crackled. Grafia frowned as she noticed the gleam in the boy's eyes as he slowly reached a hand out. She had seen that look before, pure and utter anger with a very unhealthy mixture of madness. She had seen it during the Civil War, enough to know that if left alone the boy would cause enormous strife. Looking down at Natsumi and her nervous yet hardened expression, Grafia knew that Natsumi realized, even if only subconsciously, exactly how dangerous Ken is. Alright, Ken. If the Thunderbird accepts you, do you remember the chant? Grafia asked as Ken placed his hand on the blue Thunderbird's head, grinning maniacally when nothing negative happened to him before turning and glaring at the queen. Yes. He snarled, I remember the chant. With that said, he began chanting, a red magic circle appearing between his palm and the Thunderbird. Whimper. Naruto's head snapped around, unseen as everyone else paid attention to the Thunderbird and Ken. Turning the rest of his body, he slowly walked towards where he thought he had heard the sound. Whimper. There, he yelled mentally as he started running towards the whimpers he heard, his young mind having already categorized it as a canine animal. Running through the woodlands, he placed a palm on a log while hopping over it to push himself further, and continued running. Seeing a ledge up ahead and being too close to stop without falling, he continued running and luckily only dropped a few meters. Hitting the ground in a roll, he popped back onto his feet only to see the animal which he had heard. Eyes widening in surprise, he allowed himself to catch his breath as he marveled over the sleek black fur and large claws. Cerberus, he breathed out, astonished, before the rational side of his mind took over. No. A Cerberus, not the Cerberus. Maybe an experiment? Genetic malfunction? He wondered to himself as he walked over to the large three-headed dog, all three heads looking like a German shepherd, which, even with its large size, being a meter tall even while lying on its stomach, he could tell it was a puppy. As he looked over the canine, he noticed why it was whimpering. A large, demonic-looking leech was attached to its side. The very thing was as large as his head. Aiming carefully, he activated a basic fireball spell. As the magic circle whirled into existence, he quickly modified it, something he had learned to do after countlessly spamming the spell and learning almost all of its intricacies. The fireball spell roared to life as the characters within the outer rings randomly changed before settling into an almost completely different pattern to the regular spell, and out of the magic circle came a flame so hot it turned blue, which when it struck the leech killed it instantly. Smiling widely at performing one of his very few modified spells correctly, he looked at the Sirzechs, which already looked healthier, as it slowly stood up. Naruto raised his head as the Sirzechs stood up and found it to be almost 3 times taller than him when standing at its full height. Tensing his body as the large creature lowered its 3 heads down to his level and stared at him before licking him with its oversized tongue, which made Naruto sputter as some slobber got in his mouth. "Thankful?" he asked softly and got another lick in return. "Would you like to become my familiar?" he asked the 3-headed creature, who seemed to think about it for a moment before nodding. Little did he know that by doing this his future just got a whole lot more interesting. Grafia was the first to notice Naruto's disappearance, not surprising as Sayuri was looking frantically around them to see if she could find a spirit for herself, and Natsumi hadn't taken her eyes off the smug form of Ken, who had the Thunderbird flying slightly above and behind him. Subtly looking around for her king's younger brother, she picked up her pace subconsciously. Extending her senses, she sighed in relief as she felt the customary spike in magic that occurred when a devil made a familiar pact. Though she was slightly surprised by the size of the magic spike, wondering what creature he made a pact with that made the pact give off such a large spike. "It seems Naruto-sama has made an interesting familiar," Grafia muttered loud enough for the 3 kids with her to hear. All 3 heads snapped towards her. Sayuri in intrigue and confusion, Ken in confusion and anger, and Natsumi in confusion followed by horror, as she realized that she had been so focused on Ken getting a familiar that she had completely lost track of her king. Following after Grafia, they all saw some trees toppling ahead of them. Whatever it was moving towards them as well, and considering this is the direction Naruto was in, it as a safe assumption to guess that it was Naruto's familiar which was causing the damage. What familiar did you get, Naruto-sama?" Natsumi asked herself in awe as they saw the fairly large trees fall over like they weren't hundreds of years old. Ken gritted his teeth in anger. Of course the devil would get something capable of that much destruction. Just like those monsters who destroyed the orphanage, he thought, unbidden. Images of one of the orphanage mother's skin melting off flashed through his mind. As Naruto and his Sirzechs came into view, even Grafia stared in shock at the small, though tall for his age, boy sitting on the middle head of the large canine. Looking down, the boy smiled slightly and patted the head he was sitting on. "Meet try," he said in a soft voice full of pride and happiness. Natsumi squealed so loud in excitement/happiness for her king that everyone had to cover their ears. It had been a few days since they had visited the familiar forest, and everyone other than Natsumi had gained a familiar. Sayuri also had far too much fun making the young queen blush in embarrassment by constantly bringing up the tri-squeal. Now, in front of Natsumi stood Naruto, and in front of him stood the 3 massive warehouses that had a combined area of 46,500 square meters, roughly 500,000 square feet for you Imperial users. Sayuri whistled in appreciation at the 3 massive buildings which completely dwarfed the 4 children. "How many stories is that?" Sayuri asked Naruto in surprise as she craned her head up. "It has to be at least 3, she commented resolutely. 4, actually," Naruto muttered as he walked forward and opened the door to the middle one and walked through. As the 4-person peerage walked into the warehouse, 3 of them marveled at how it somehow seemed larger from the inside than from the outside, while the 4th just grinned evilly while keeping his eyes locked on the back of Naruto's head. Pulling out his notebook, Naruto began scribbling into it, causing Natsumi to walk up next to him to see what he was doing. What are you writing, Naruto-sama?" she asked curiously. "Notes on where to put things and how to use this space effectively," he replied as he continued scribbling notes down before looking around. Natsumi raised an eyebrow as he did and turned to look where he was looking. What are you looking at, Naru?" Before she could finish, she was cut off as the sound of lightning filled the air and caused both her and Naruto to turn around. Naruto had only just felt the pulse of magic before he heard the lightning, and as he turned around he saw a lightning-covered cleaver flying towards his head, and only just managed to move his head back enough to not take a lethal injury. Instead, the cleaver left a deep cut along his cheek, not deep enough to leave a scar though. Screaming in pain as the overcharged lightning that coated the cleaver entered his body, when it sliced him, he felt his right leg and left arm go numb, and crumpled to the ground as his muscles tensed painfully. Natsumi growled in anger and pounced at Ken, who had already jumped forward with 2 more lightning-coated cleavers in an attempt to kill Naruto. Tackling him with all the power of a speeding bus and forcing him into the cement as they skidded to a halt, she coated her hands in kitsune by fire and tried to strike him, only for her fire-covered hands to be blocked by the flats of his lightning-covered cleavers. "Why did you harm Naruto-sama?" she roared as she increased the output of her flames, which caused him to do the same with his lightning. "He's a devil! If it wasn't for him and his kind, there would be no sin, no death," he growled right back, the image of the orphanage mother burning to death flashing through his mind, and I know I'm not strong enough to take out the mouse, but even killing one devil is enough. I'll be able to free you and that wolf from his influence. From the sidelines, poor, conflicted and confused Sayuri flinched. Even killing one devil is enough for her to forgive me from the afterlife. He yelled, confusing the fox girl enough that he could momentarily overpower her, and managed to zap her in her side, which was unprotected by her fire. The unfortunate 10-year-old screamed in pain as the boy threw her off of him and rushed Naruto, who now had motor function back and was glaring at him. Upon reaching Naruto, the once human boy jumped in the air and brought his arm down, using gravity to add extra force to his blow. Knocking Ken's arm to the side and unbalancing him with a palm strike to his forearm, Naruto followed it up with a punch to Ken's chest, which struck solidly and caused the boy to wince. Growling in anger, the brown-haired youth tapped into the vile power of the night piece he was reincarnated with to speed up his movements and attack Naruto with a flurry of electrocuted cleaver strikes and the occasional other melee move, which Naruto managed to only just stay ahead of. Cursing as his leg buckled from the fatigue of the earlier electrocution, and having never properly trained his body, he stared as the two cleavers drew closer in fear. Naruto-sama! Natsumi screamed in panic. Everyone in the warehouse felt it, the sudden increase in Natsumi's magic. Natsumi herself felt like her body was on fire as she leveled her gaze on Ken, the world having suddenly seemed to slow down. In a blur of motion, Natsumi launched herself from her position, and before anyone else could properly process it, had her fist in Ken's cheek, sending him flying away from Naruto, who hit the ground with a groan and slowly stood back up. Sayuri stood frozen in her original position, her brain furiously trying to keep up with the events that had just happened. Naruto was so nice, why had Ken attacked? Naruto was influencing them? No. That's Ken's delusions. Why are they attacking each other? She thought mutely as she watched the events unfold, her brain not allowing her body to act as she stared helplessly. She turned her head towards Natsumi when she felt the increase in magical pressure, and was so surprised when she blurred forward and nailed Ken hard enough to knock him away that only one thought was able to process through her brain. Two tails? Hearing a growl of anger, they turned towards Ken to see a dark aura surrounding him, his muscles bulging and convulsing as lightning crackled around his form. His skin started to darken, and he screamed in pain as one large wing made of bones sprouted out of his back in a shower of blood and muscle, which made all three still sane kids want to vomit. He's becoming a stray, Naruto muttered as he stood next to his queen as they both faced down the growing monstrosity in front of them. Ugly one as well, she spat angrily as her, unknown to her, two tails waved frantically behind her in anger. Falling onto all fours, Ken panted raggedly and grinned insanely at the two, his blood still leaking off his bone wing and out of the hole it made in his back. You didn't have to stand with him. But because you did, I get to kill you as well, he screamed maniacally, his voice flickering between his regular voice and a deeper, more demonic voice. Raising his left arm in the air and creating a dark purple magic circle, he slammed it down onto the concrete, cracking it with the sheer force. Out of the magic circle came the Thunderbird that Ken had made a contract with but days earlier. Kill them! He screamed, and with a loud cry the Thunderbird flapped its wings and sent a bolt of lightning towards the pair. Placing both palms forward, Naruto created a large magic circle that glowed blue, and once the characters making up the magic circle stabilized, pulsed his magic into it, creating a large bullet of water which intercepted the lightning bolt. Keep him and his familiar off me for a moment, Naruto ordered his queen, who nodded and shot forward while coating her hands in fire. Groaning in anger, Naruto slammed both of his palms onto the cement, and from his palms a massive magic circle spun into existence. Stopping just in front of Ken, Natsumi sent out a twin flamethrower of fire from her palms, which Ken blocked with his bone wing before unfolding it quickly to try and hit her with it. Bending backward slightly, the Kitsune girl dodged the wing and took a step forward and swung her foot at his temple, lighting it on fire halfway through her motion. Ducking down, the demonic-looking boy dodged the blow and, spinning on one palm, attempted to sweep her legs with his. Attempted being the keyword, as Natsumi jumped over the kick and struck him in the face with a kick of her own, using his face as a springboard and flipping back, taking a potshot at his Thunderbird using her Kitsune by and landing with a grace previously unknown to her as her slitted eyes glared dangerously at the boy. Crying in pain, the Thunderbird turned its sights towards the lesser threat to it, the boy powering a large magic circle. Coating itself in lightning, the Thunderbird sped towards Naruto, intent on impaling him through at the speeds it was flying at. A few meters away from the magic circle, the familiar squawked in surprise as a giant paw came out of the magic circle like it was a portal, said paw pulling the top half of Tri through the circle, who upon seeing the Thunderbird snapped at it with all three of its heads. The Thunderbird cried out in pain as the Cerberus successfully tore its wing off and unbalanced it enough that it shot to the left of Naruto before losing complete control and skidding along the concrete in a bloody trail. As cruel as it may have sounded, Naruto, At the time, he would later feel sorry for it, felt absolutely no sympathy towards the bird, and as he walked towards the fierce battle between his queen and Ken, he spoke to try. Kill the bird, then assist in killing the stray, he ordered coldly, his sympathy and other similar emotions having been forced away when that cleaver sliced his face. Said wound was still bleeding now that he thought about it. Walking forward even as he heard the giant footsteps of his familiar and the dying screech of the bird before a sickeningly loud crunch silenced it, he stared at Ken before moving his gaze to Sayuri, who seemed to be severely shell-shocked. Naruto allowed himself to feel for a brief few moments, and smiled comfortingly at the girl before squashing those emotions down again and stalking towards the half-stray. Picking up his speed until he was running, Naruto quickly bent down and grabbed the first thrown cleaver while still running towards Ken and Natsumi. Ken growled as this pest somehow managed to keep up with him, as he had long since dropped his cleavers in anger, and now just coated his bone wing and elongated nails in lightning as he flipped and slashed at her like a whirlwind of death. Though the kitsune had learned from her first injury and hadn't let herself be touched by anything covered in lightning, unfortunately this meant that she didn't have enough time to counterattack. Slamming his foot into the floor and causing a tiny crater to form under his foot, and extended his wing fully and spun in a full circle, said action making the two-tailed girl jump back to avoid injury. As he was about to attack again, he felt something pulse through him and grinned ferally when he felt both his body and magic growing stronger, his elation allowing him to completely ignore another bone wing which tore open the other half of his back and sent a second shower of blood flying, a few drops hitting Natsumi, who stared unflinchingly at him. "Oh. Seems like someone's in trouble." He giggled maniacally as he felt his muscles grow and convulse once again, causing him to double in size and height. Flexing his fist, he shot towards Natsumi, taking extreme glee in the way that her eyes widened in shock before feeling a gust of wind and seeing all three heads of the devil's disgusting mutt inhaling. The slight wisps of fire leaving the corners of their mouths was the only warning Ken got as all three heads spat a sea of fire at him. Using his newfound speed, he flapped his wings while jumping backwards, causing him to backflip as he moved back. Flipping back, he felt his feet hit the ground as he skidded backwards and placed one hand on the ground to keep his balance as he slid backwards across the cement. Out of his peripheral vision, he saw Naruto's feet touch the ceiling as he jumped so that he would hit the ceiling of the ground floor upside down, and before gravity could take effect, kicked off to send him downwards towards Ken at an accelerated pace. A flash of silver and the sound of metal cutting through the air was all he heard as Naruto cut through his right arm and wing. Ken screamed in pain and jumped back, though with the pain blinding his senses he was just slow enough that Natsumi could take advantage, hit his left arm and wing with an overpowered kitsune by destroying his left arm and making his bone wing so hot that when it met the wall it instantly fused to it, leaving him stuck in one spot with not limbs on his upper body. Naruto slowly and cautiously walked up to the struggling Ken, and when he was only 2 meters away raised one hand in his direction and a large magic circle sprang to life, the modified characters almost instantly clicking into place as the air heated up around the magic circle, some embers starting to float through the air. "You don't have the guts. You'll fail and I'll kill you and avenge Mother Rose for the sin and deaths you devils caused," he screamed angrily while still trying to free his wing from the wall it had fused to. Staring at Ken blankly as his spell powered up with the last dregs of his magic energy, Naruto spoke up. "I gave you so much, and you did this. Attacked my peerage, my family? There is nothing that can be done for you. Enjoy death," he said monotonously as the spell activated. Almost as if it had been Try himself who had created them, a massive flamethrower of white flames left the magic circle and burnt Ken to death. Naruto stared blankly as Ken laughed insanely until he died, his skin charring black and along with his muscles melting onto the floor, his eyeballs popping like balloons and the smell that quickly filled the immediate area. As much as his entire being screamed to look away from the gruesome scene, he couldn't, nor could he stop his spell, probably some vindictive side of him getting revenge. Finally, after what felt like an eternity to all the children, Naruto finally ran out of magic and the flames tapered away, a charred and melted skeleton all that was left, and as Naruto panted in exhaustion he felt like some switch had been flipped and all of a sudden everything came rushing to the forefront at once, and he suddenly couldn't hold his stomach as his once again emotional mind relived what he had just done. Naruto managed to get all of 9 steps at a running pace before he fell to his hands and knees and vomited onto the ground, and as much as Natsumi wanted to go over and comfort him, her body had decided that now was a good time to introduce her to the effects of gaining another tail, and her entire body crumpled from under her. As the fox girl hit the cement with the grace of a puppet with its strings cut, Try slowly and carefully walked over and began sniffing and eating the chopped off and destroyed remains of Ken, much to the girl's disgust. Having finally emptied his entire stomach and only just stopped dry heaving, the poor male Gremry turned his head to the side slowly while panting to see a shaking and crying Sayuri standing next to him. Dry heaving once more, he turned back to her to see her fall to her knees beside him, not seeming to care about the vomit next to her, as tears streamed down her face. I am sorry. If I had helped. I could have stopped him but I was so surprised. And before the train wreck of a girl could say anything more, Naruto turned to her and wrapped her in a hug. Crying even louder, the wolf spirit hugged him back and cried into his blood-soaked shirt as Naruto hiccuped before beginning to sob as well. The emotional weight of what had just happened finally settling in as Tri gently brought Natsumi over to the two crying children, the fox girl beginning to break down in tears herself. And while they would have to tell someone about what happened eventually, they would leave out this part. This part of the story was just for them. It had been roughly 25 days since the incident with Ken. Since then, Naruto had practically moved into the three warehouses along with Sayuri and Natsumi, who had developed an almost obsessive devotion to him. Currently inside the warehouse on the right was Sayuri and Naruto, Natsumi having left to do a job that she wouldn't disclose to Naruto. With Naruto, he leant back, trying to regulate his breathing as Sayuri and him hit their 20th minute of non-stop hand-to-hand combat, something he had been working on almost every day since the incident. Seeing the blur of Sayuri's fist miss his head, he leant forward again and tried to knee her in the stomach as her body twisted with her punch. Sayuri, seeing the incoming knee, twisted back and went to elbow her king, determined to get a hit in herself if she was going to get hit anyway. Grinning slightly in satisfaction as her elbow met his face due to her night speed, she was soon reminded that while she was faster than he was stronger as his knee hit her in the stomach while his body began to fall sideways thanks to her own blow. Gasping in pain, both kids hit the floor and shakily stood to their feet, both of them being covered in sweat and bruises that they had inflicted on each other. You need to get a rook, Sayuri mumbled shakily as she stood to her feet, her hip popping as she stood at her full height. Didn't you and Natsumi take it upon yourselves to find peerage members? Naruto asked as he cocked his head. Yes, but you could help, she replied as she slipped into a loose fighting stance, grinning as he did the same. Natsumi still doesn't know that you know what she's doing as well. I trust her, was all he said in reply, and you know why I don't help. The last one I chose to reincarnate nearly killed Natsumi, and he said in anger, which she knew he was directing at himself. Launching forward, she saw him snap his eyes to her and tense his body, and her eyes twinkled in satisfaction even as she cartwheeled into an axe kick from above. She had been with him every day since the incident, just as Natsumi had, and hated it when he blamed himself for Ken. Even if she blamed herself for not helping in the fight at all, which was one of the reasons she was so adamant about helping Naruto train himself, it also gave her an opportunity to train herself. Grabbing her ankle, he pulled back as her foot swung down and, using the opportunity created by unbalancing her, let go of her ankle and struck his palm into her chest, causing her to cough as she hit the ground. And before he could revel in being able to hit his quick as lightning knight, he felt a weightless feeling as she swept his legs out from under him and gasped breathlessly as he hit the ground once more and got winded. I think that's enough for now, he said breathlessly as he tried to catch his breath while lying on the ground. Allowing her body to relax, she stood up and took a deep breath and nodded down at him before looking at him worriedly as she held a hand out. I didn't hurt you too badly, did I so, Taishu? Captain Commander, she asked in concern. Grabbing her hand while shaking his head, he sighed and nursed his chest as she helped pull him to his feet. I'm fine. Braith, I was just winded, he said softly before smiling softly at her. Feeling her cheeks light up red, she let go of his hand and wiped her hands on her black shirt and skirt before groaning in disgust. We both need a shower, she said, voicing her opinion as her enhanced nose caught their scents. I suppose we do, he said before sniffing himself experimentally and recoiling in disgust. At least I, definitely do, he said resolutely. Walking out of the giant warehouse on the far right, and moving towards the far left warehouse, the two children walked inside. Walking through the furnished yet still very Spartan-feeling warehouse, Naruto began walking up the stairs to the second floor with Sayuri not far behind him. Walking up to the second floor, Naruto paused for a moment as he looked at the fairly old couch and few recreational activities they had managed to scavenge for their HQ, as Natsumi and Sayuri called it. Clicking his tongue and making a mental note to get more activities for their second floor, he continued walking up to the third floor, and this is where Sayuri split off from him, going to her room, which along with rooms for all his other potential peerage members had been built on this floor. Watching the door to her room shut, he slowly trudged his way up to the top floor, the floor which against his wishes had been turned into a penthouse for him and him alone. Though Sirzechs had made some weird comment about female company when he was older, which made Grafia pull her husband's ear hard enough that it genuinely hurt him. Reaching the top of the stairs, he walked into his room, his gaze running across the few pieces of furniture and personal items he had. Some of which included things like a Norse rune of Thor and a large scroll with a painting depicting the Shinto gods, Amaterasu, Susanoo and Tsukuyomi, that he had hung up on his wall. Walking over to the bathroom installed in the corner of his room, he sighed and rolled his shoulders painfully while locking the door to the bathroom behind him. For a night Sayuri hits hard, he griped to himself as he begun undressing. Taking off his shirt, he threw it in the basket off to the side of the bathroom, and as he went to take his pants off, he heard something clink against the smooth tiles. Looking down to where the sound came from, he felt his blood turn to ice. There, on the floor, sat the faintly glowing night piece which had once been Ken's. Bending down slowly and cautiously, almost as if afraid Ken would jump out of the piece and kill him, he bent down to grab it, freezing with his hand above it as he noticed how his hand was shaking. And now that he had noticed it, his whole body was shaking in fact. Grabbing his wrist with his other hand, he tried to take some deep breaths. Once he felt like he had regained control, he quickly grabbed the night piece and frowned as he looked at it. The proud grimy red glow it had once had was now dimmed considerably, and was a darkened red, as if tainted by the one it had once been used on. Ajuka Beelzebub himself had looked at the piece and said that while it would still work as intended, it was currently weakened and basically was the inverse of a mutation piece. Meaning that if a regular night piece could easily reincarnate someone, the same person using his night on the same person would struggle if not fail to reincarnate them. The creator of the evil pieces system had told him that all of his scans had said that with time the piece would regain its former power, but that could potentially take years. Scowling in anger, Naruto placed the piece on the bench before fully getting undressed and going for his shower. Natsumi felt her golden eyes twitch as she looked at the bruise-covered forms of her king and her friend and sighed in annoyance. Naruto was sitting on the couch with an unapologetic look while wearing black camouflage pants and black sneakers with a dark red, long-sleeved shirt with a collar. Sayuri meanwhile was chuckling nervously while sitting on the couch with her king while wearing a silver skirt, which stopped just above her knees, and a light blue short-sleeved shirt. "Why, you couldn't have done anything a little less harmful?" she asked, still annoyed at coming home to see this. Of course, she was also internally squealing at seeing Naruto with wet hair, but she would go to the grave with that secret. "Then we wouldn't improve," Naruto said factually, in a soft tone. Taking a calming breath, the Kitsune girl tried to think about how Graphia would handle this situation, and upon thinking up the most likely solution, she smiled internally. Bending at the waist and putting on the most cute and innocent smile she could while closing her eyes, she spoke. "Naruto-sama," she drawled innocently. Said drawl made a shiver go up the young boy's spine. "You have the ball in 2 days at Lord Phoenix's house. You wouldn't want to make a bad impression, would you?" Something about seeing his usually meek and submissive queen this assertive and scary sent a shiver down Naruto's spine, and not the good kind. Seeing her king chuckling nervously, the blonde girl nodded to herself in victory and stood back up straight. "And now let's get you healed up. I've found 3 peerage members for you, Naruto-sama," she said proudly with a wide smile. "T3? Naruto asked in surprise. "Oh, of course. Sayuri-san and I have been looking for 2 weeks. We wanted to make sure you were protected after all," she said softly and giggled lightly as Naruto quickly looked between the two. Before Naruto could speak up, Sayuri placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled comfortingly. "Relax, so Taishu. Natsumi and I made sure another Ken incident wouldn't happen. You trust us, right?" she asked, squeezing his shoulder comfortingly, getting a sigh out of the boy. "Okay," he spoke before standing up while trying to regulate his breathing. After taking a few steps, he turned back towards the two with a shaky smile. "Weren't Sayuri and I going to go get healed so we can meet them? You don't have them just sitting and waiting for us, do you?" he joked to Natsumi weakly to try and hide his nervousness. Smiling softly at his attempts to put up a brave face, she walked over and hugged him, smiling sadly at the way his body tensed at the intimate contact. "It's okay to be scared, Naruto-sama. And while I do appreciate the attempt at humor," she said with a small giggle, "it's not needed. You know Sayuri-san, and I would never let you get hurt, right?" she murmured into his ear while gesturing to Sayuri to join the intimate moment, which she did. "Why, yeah. I know," he said while tightening the hug slightly before taking a shaky breath and breaking off the hug. "Who are the 3 you found?" he asked as a magic circle lit up underneath them. All he received in reply were a pair of giggles and laughs from the 2 girls. Materializing above a red magic circle, a newly healed Naruto and Sayuri looked around and noticed their surroundings, tall brick buildings surrounding them. "A slums district," Naruto voiced softly. Nodding at how quickly her king had figured out a rough estimation of where they were, she tapped on his shoulder politely and gestured to follow her. Not knowing where to go, he followed Natsumi and smiled as he noticed Sayuri get into a protective position next to him so that she could defend him if necessary. Reaching a large gap in the surrounding buildings, Naruto looked around, analyzing everything he saw as it was his first time being here, unlike his peerage members who had been here before. Hearing a cough, his gaze snapped to a dirty girl sitting on a couch that was elevated off the ground by boxes and crates, raising an eyebrow when the girl shivered with a smile at the piercing gaze he leveled on her. "He is the one you guys spoke of," Such a strong gaze, she cooed as she stood up and walked down the stairs of crates. Naruto kept his gaze on her, his purple eyes staring into her icy blue eyes, raising an eyebrow in confusion, while keeping his eyes locked on her in wariness, as her cheeks began to turn subtly red. Flipping her icy blue hair back, she stood right in front of him and noticed the two girls who had been visiting her for a week tense up in wariness. "It's nice to finally meet you, Naruto-sama," she purred as her 140 centimeters, roughly 4 feet 7 inches, frame stood in comparison to his 150 centimeters, roughly 4 feet 11 inches, frame. "Yes," Natsumi said politely, "this is our king, Naruto-sama. As you already know, he is looking for peerage members, and as a half Yukiana Sayuri-san, and I believe you would fit in well. Also, your personality fits in with a role we would like you and another to play," the kitsune explained pleasantly with a small smile. "See?" Sayuri chuckled and bumped her hip against Natsumi's with a grin. "Why can't you speak like that all the time?" she asked the girl and blushed in embarrassment. "I don't want Naruto-sama looking like a bad king in front of his death-san," Natsumi murmured, and Sayuri chuckled. "So your name is Isteth? A half Yukiana as well? What is the other half? I'd assume from the regular appearance and lack of any other physical or magical tells that your father was a human?" Naruto questioned analytically, which got a smile out of the icy-haired girl. "Good mind, I'm glad. I wouldn't want to serve anyone who couldn't think. Do you mind a spar? If you can beat me, I'll join your peerage without complaint," she said with a grin that grew wider at the thought of battling a person as strong as she sensed Naruto to be. Quickly looking towards his queen and knight, who both nodded to tell him that not only was she telling the truth but that she was also trustworthy, he returned his gaze back to the girl and nodded slightly, but enough for her to see. Seeing the nod, the girl jumped back and smiled widely as the air around her began to chill and become visible. At an unspoken signal, the girl stomped her foot on the ground and sharp spikes of ice began heading at the 10-year-old boy, who stepped to the side and twisted his body while keeping his gaze firmly on her as the frozen water shot past him and impacted a wall, his gaze causing the girl to shiver once more. Changing stances and placing both her palms by her hips, she pulsed her magic and began directing it to her hands, a battle-crazed grin stretching across her lips. While looking at the boy, she saw his eyes glaze over slightly before widening in fear, almost as if he was looking at something through her, which startled him, and before his death could react, she felt, and saw, the pulse of his magic and a dark red and black blur speed towards her. Feeling a tight grip around her throat, she coughed as Naruto used his hand on her throat to slam her into the concrete below, cracking it with the force of impact. For Naruto, he had been watching her change into a different stance, and he tensed his body in preparation, but when he felt the pulse of magic and saw the grin on her lips, his death suddenly disappeared, and in her place was Ken, his insane grin stretching across his almost black skin and blood still dripping off of the ceiling from his bone wings. Feeling his body move on instinct, he didn't fight it as he closed in on the unmoving form of Stray Ken, and wrapping his fingers around his throat, slammed him into the concrete, cracking it from the force of his blow. Blinking suddenly, the image of Stray Ken disappeared and his death lay in his place, a grin on her face even as her pale cheeks turned bright red. Letting go of her throat, he stood up and shook his head as Natsumi and Sayuri ran over. "Damn, so Taishu. Where'd that come from?" Sayuri said while whistling in appreciation. "Hey, his death was fine, so she was allowed to think it was cool." "Are you alright, his death-san?" Natsumi asked before blinking in surprise as Naruto offered a hand to help his death up, said girl, blushing even brighter as her blue eyes looked into Naruto's with some sort of twinkle that none of the kids had ever seen before. "I'm fine. I'm so glad that you three came to me. What piece would you like to reincarnate me as, Naruto-sama?" His death asked respectfully while bowing. "What even happened, Naruto-sama? That move wasn't very like you," Natsumi asked and got a grimace out of her king. "I saw Ken in place of his death-san," was all he said, and instantly the two girls knew why he had reacted the way he had, and while his death was intrigued, she wouldn't interrupt her new master when she saw that he was about to speak his death-san. "Can you lie on your back?" Naruto requested, and nodding, the girl did as she was asked. Kneeling next to her, the red-haired boy grabbed out a singular pawn and placed it on her chest. Beginning the chant to reincarnate her, he blinked in surprise as her Yukiana magic synced with the pawn as it sunk into her chest and sent a cloud of snow outward from her position, instantly freezing the concrete and a brick wall near the children. Placing her hands on the ground and flicking her legs up, his death tensed her arms and flicked herself up onto her feet. Clenching her fist a little, she grinned widely once again as she noticed the significant increase in her power. Falling to one knee and bowing her head to Naruto, she spoke obediently. "I am your soldier to command, Naruto-sama. For giving me this strength, I will gladly lay down my life for you." As her head was down, she never saw the questioning look Naruto sent his queen and knight, only to get a nervous smile and shrug from the two girls. "I am glad to hear that." Now rise, I believe Natsumi has 2 more members she's found for me. Death stood up and looked towards the kitsune girl who walked towards the newly reincarnated girl. Before we do, I need to clean this filth off of you. I don't want Naruto-sama to appear bad to our other 2 members. Quickly holding the girl still, Natsumi grabbed out a cloth. Death grumbled internally as he rubbed her cheeks, which along with all the other visible parts of her body had been cleaned by the queen. So I'm supposed to be like a, what was the word? Discipliner? Death asked Sayuri, who nodded. And this next girl we are going to get is also supposed to be a discipliner? She asked and got another nod and a chuckle. Yep. Natsumi and I spent 4 days brainstorming all of the roles for So Taisha's peerage, Sayuri said proudly as Natsumi activated a teleportation circle under them, and after a few seconds the 4 disappeared in a flash of light. Appearing in an alley opposite an orphanage, the 4 walked out and at Natsumi's directions entered the orphanage, and Sayuri, while hiding her animal features like Natsumi also was, jumped forward excitedly and began asking to meet her friend in a childish voice, which got the old matron to laugh and allowed the 4 children through. Naruto raising an eyebrow at Sayuri's acting abilities, potential uses already flitting through his head. Reaching a plain white door, Sayuri walked in and the other 3 followed after her and entered the room where a purple-haired girl sat kneeling in the center of the room with a wooden katana across her lap. Opening her blue eyes, they brightened at seeing Natsumi and Sayuri, the only 2 kids she had ever met before that weren't scared of her, before turning to the other 2 children in the room. The 3rd female stood straight and at attention and watched her with a gaze that she had seen at times when looking at her reflection in the mirror. She could tell she was strong and felt every muscle in her body tense in anticipation at fighting her. Blinking, she moved her gaze to the only male in the room. Him, the one that her friends had talked about so passionately, the one who had supposedly gained the alliance of a 3-headed fire-breathing dog and killed a member of his own peerage who had turned stray. She felt every nerve in her body melt under his gaze, and simply one look at him told her that she was outclassed in every way. She couldn't sense his power, she was a simple human after all, but she knew of his power, simply from the way her body reacted. It was similar to the feeling she experienced after killing that strange man with the black wings that had tried to kidnap her, but only so many times stronger. Taking a breath and trying to calm her nerves, she slowly stood and bowed low to Naruto, while holding her wooden katana, which was far too large for her, at her side. It is a pleasure to finally meet you, Naruto-sama. I am Siko Busujima, she said evenly before standing back at her full height of 4 feet 7 inches, which matched Estetha's. So you are the second piece Natsumi and Sayuri found, he said softly. Have they told you about what your position would be? He asked while cocking his head and looking at her. Yes. She answered immediately. Natsumi-san told me that I would be a discipliner with another member, and try to help discipline and keep your peerage in line for you when you aren't around for any reason. Naruto nodded appreciatively towards Natsumi, who beamed happily. Siko-san. You are a regular human, correct? At the girl's nod he continued, did Natsumi or Sayuri explain why they chose you? Yes. Sayuri-san explained that even though I was a human with no special abilities, I managed to kill a fallen angel. Naruto looked at her in surprise before nodding happily. Siko felt her body heat up as a small but happy smile lit up her face. Thinking for a moment, he realized what the best piece would be, given the wooden katana with her, and flinched before taking a calming breath and taking out the faded night piece, tensing as the image of Ken attacking him flitted across his mind before disappearing again. Siko-san. Please lie down on the floor, he instructed softly, and raised an eyebrow once again as she did what he asked instantly, and without hesitation. From the sidelines, Estet did the same and looked at the other 2 girls. Sayuri chuckled nervously and Natsumi rocked on her feet and looked away. Siko is a bit like you in terms of personality, it's why you're both discipliners. Though since she is a full-blooded human, So Taisha couldn't gain her allegiance safely, so Natsumi spent a bit of time with her and our 3rd pick convincing them, shall we say, to be loyal to So Taisha, Sayuri said with another nervous chuckle. Estet meanwhile blinked and leant a bit to the side to get a better view of Natsumi, suddenly seeing a much less innocent, and far more sinister side, to the sweet kitsune girl. Shivering, and not in a good way, the Yukiana quickly straightened up and turned back to Naruto and Siko, the ritual nearly complete. Feeling a hand on her shoulder, she turned to Sayuri, who grinned at her. Don't worry, it took me a good 5 to 7 days to find out about Taisha's dark side. So you're actually much quicker on the uptake than I am, Sayuri said with a grin that didn't help Estet feel any better. As the night piece sunk into her chest, she felt a slight burning sensation before feeling a burst of power, and suddenly she could feel the magic of those around her. As she was standing up, her mind finally registered the power she felt from Naruto, and while fairly weak in the supernatural world, it felt like world-ending power to Siko, who promptly lost all of her strength in her legs and fell back onto the ground. Seeing a hand in front of her face, she looked up to see that it was Naruto who was offering it, and upon grabbing his hand and being pulled to her feet nearly fell back down again as she felt the muscles in his hand alone. "You do not mind leaving the orphanage?" he asked softly, only to get a shake of her head in return. "I have only been here for a year and a half and the other kids are afraid of me. I will follow you wherever you wish to go," Naruto-sama, Siko said in a reverent tone. Nodding slowly as he didn't know how to react, he turned to Natsumi, who nodded and, spreading her arms out to her sides, created a magic circle under their feet and teleported them. Blinking as the light from the teleportation disappeared, Naruto stared at the building in front of them dryly. "Another orphanage?" he asked Natsumi dryly. "You certainly know what you're going for," he muttered. "Orphans are the easiest to mania, I'm convinced," she chirped innocently, the other three girls shivering and taking a step away from the kitsune girl. Gesturing for Sayuri or Natsumi to lead the way, Sayuri once again bounded forward and, opening the door, lead the way for the group of 10 to 11-year-old children. Walking inside, Naruto saw the kids running around and saw the hazelnut eyes of a girl with light blonde hair light up as she ran over and hugged Sayuri. Hearing Natsumi cough next to him, the girl's eyes lit up again before following the motion Natsumi made to him, and upon seeing him, confusion seemed to fill her eyes for a few moments. After those few moments, he saw the metaphorical light bulb go off in her head as recognition flashed through her eyes, and she walked forward confidently. Standing at 143 centimeters, roughly 4 feet 8 inches, she stood before Naruto and grinned. "Nice to meet you. I'm Tsunade Senju," she greeted herself confidently. Offering a handshake, her smile grew wider as when she squeezed down with her higher-than-normal strength, he matched her easily. "Pretty strong, just like Natsumi," said Tsunade, praised before looking him, his death and Siko up and down appraisingly. "You all look pretty strong actually. So, I'm happy to join you. What piece am I going to be?" she asked curiously, almost laughing as Naruto looked at her in confusion and wariness. "Just like that?" he asked suspiciously. "Relax, I'm not going to bite, and yes, just like that. Your queen over there spent an entire week convincing me. I've got to say, I'm sorry about what happened with Ken. I promise not to go crazy like he did," she said, and Naruto shot a look at Natsumi, whose smile shook for half a moment. "I'm glad to hear that. Do you have any abilities or significant attributes?" he asked, and Tsunade puffed her chest up in pride. "I have one of those sacred thingies." "Sacred gears," Natsumi spoke up. That Natsumi was talking about. "I'm going to be your medic," she said with a proud smile, while ignoring Natsumi. "You seem happy to be a medic," Naruto pointed out, trying to get a better feeling of her personality. "Of course. My grandfather and grandmother were both doctors and my mother was a nurse," she said, obviously proud of her family. Naruto smiled softly at Tsunade. "I'm sure they would be proud to hear that you want to follow in their footsteps. I'll try to help you be the best medic you can be," he said sincerely, which got a bright smile from the girl. Natsumi was right. "I'm already enjoying being a part of your peerage, even if I'm not in it yet. So, what piece will I be?" she asked as she bounced on the balls of her feet. Naruto thought for a moment, and quickly pulled out a bishop piece, holding it up for Tsunade to see. "A bishop? What does that piece do again?" she asked in confusion. "Increased magical potential but lowered physical abilities," Naruto answered succinctly. Tsunade clicked her tongue in annoyance while looking at the piece. "Will I still be able to fight? I don't like sitting back during stuff, I like to get in nice and personal," Tsunade said with a cocky grin. "With training you should be able to handle melee combat against other pieces," Naruto replied, and Tsunade grinned and nodded enthusiastically. "Well? What are we waiting for?" she asked as she looked at the piece in his hand. 2 days later we see Naruto and his 5 peerage members all dressed in formal clothing, though much to Natsumi's chagrin, Naruto seemed determined to put off actually going to the Phoenix Ball as long as possible. Huffing in annoyance, the Kitsune girl marched out of the right warehouse and entered the warehouse in the middle, the one where Ken had attacked them, the time between then and now having made it feel like a lifetime since that event. Opening the door, she heard the sound of welding and saw a bright light over one of the machines that Naruto had managed to get for his research warehouse, as Sayuri called it. Walking around the sheet, stopping any stray sparks from escaping, she saw Naruto and Sayuri both wearing welding helmets while welding 2 metal pipes together. Quickly walking over and tapping Naruto on the shoulder before he could continue welding and damage her eyes, she smiled. "And Naruto-sama, could you tell me why you and Sayuri-san are welding in a suit and dress?" she stressed as she gestured to the expensive blood-red suit Naruto was wearing and silver dress that Sayuri was wearing, both having been ordered by Venilana, along with the dresses for the rest of the peerage. Naruto sighed and took off the welding helmet, grabbing Sayuri's as she did the same. I was hoping to ruin it so I wouldn't have to go, he muttered distastefully as he slung the masks up and wiped off any dust on his suit before beginning to walk into the accommodation warehouse where the rest of his peerage was waiting. Upon walking in, the other three girls noticed the annoyance on his face and noticed that it wasn't actually directed at any of them. Sighing in annoyance, Naruto gestured for the rest of his peerage to come in closer and snapped his fingers, a magic circle lighting up beneath them and teleporting the 6 children to the Gremory estate, where they met up with the rest of Naruto's family before Sirzechs teleported them all to the Phoenix estate. Before Naruto could walk off, he felt a feminine hand grab his arm and turned to see his mother giving him an uncharacteristically stern look. Now, we aren't going to run off again like last time, are we? She asked, and Naruto opened his mouth to respond before a stern look from his mother made him shut it and look away. No, mother, he muttered, which got a smile from Vanillana. Quickly wrenching his arm from his mother's grip, he all but sprinted away from his family with a scowl on his face, his peerage following him while looking between each other and the mother-son duo in confusion. Arriving at a table in the very corner of the room, Naruto sat down and pulled a notebook out of his pocket as the rest of his peerage sat down at the table with him. Unable to take the tense silence, Tsunade was the first to speak up. What was that? She asked quietly so that she wouldn't draw any attention to their table. The reason I didn't want to come here, Naruto grunted before snapping his notebook shut and looking at his peerage. The Phoenix clan holds one of these balls every 2 years. The last time I came I was 8, he began, anger seeping into his hushed voice slowly, though unfortunately my family has been allies with the Phoenixes for centuries and my parents take that very seriously. It's why Rias, no matter how much she hates him, has never tried to physically harm Razor. They didn't appreciate when I stormed off after Razor mocked my last time. He claimed that I disrespected him. As Naruto explained this, he looked at the girls. Most of the girls seemed to be annoyed/angry and staring at his parents in displeasure. Though he began talking again, drawing the girls' attention back to him. Razor seems to not understand boundaries and enjoys pushing people. And considering it pretty much public knowledge that one of my knights turned stray and tried to kill me, he trailed off as he sighed. The 5 girls quickly understood, and Natsumi and Sayuri growled in annoyance while the air around his death began to cool down drastically. In an attempt to calm them down, Naruto distracted them by opening his notebook again and asking them what they would like in their rooms, etc. It had been 3 hours into the ball and things had been going good so far. Naruto and his peerage had stuck in the corner table that they had claimed as theirs and had talked about everything from personal hobbies to possible additions to the recreation floor of their HQ. Hearing footsteps approaching their table, Natsumi noticed an arrogant-looking teen with dark blonde hair walking up to their table, and upon seeing him, Naruto simultaneously glared and rolled his eyes at the young teen. Natsumi, is Death and Siko quickly realizing that this was Razor and glared at him as well. Well, if it isn't Naruto, he jeered with a nasty grin. The king, who was so pathetic he couldn't even stop his own knight from turning stray, he said in mock sadness while shrugging and shaking his head. Greetings, Razor. What brings you to our humble table? Naruto asked dryly. Tsunade snorted at Naruto's dry snark before leveling her gaze at the cocky boy. Oh, not much. I just wanted to know how you fuck up that badly that your own piece turned stray. I'd watch out, ladies. With such a bad king, one of you might turn into a stray at this very party, Razor teased with an arrogant grin. Razor blinked as he was hit by killing intent, KI, coming from the 5 girls, and he chuckled. So you managed to instill some loyalty in them? Let's see how long that lasts, Gremory. After all, you are Mummy's little failure, aren't you? The only child not to unlock the power of destruction like my Rias-chan, he mocked. The sound of a chair hitting the ground caused a few people to turn around and stare as Naruto now stood, his hands on the table as he glared daggers at Razor, who only smirked arrogantly back. Seeing the warning look he received from his parents, the red-haired boy scoffed and picked his chair back up before sitting back down, still glaring daggers at the Phoenix. Go away, Razor. I don't think you've ogled my sister enough tonight. Might want to get your quota in, he growled. Razor simply just smirked at having gotten under the boy's skin and walked away. The 5 girls at Naruto's table all dangerously close to attacking the teen. Asshat, Tsunade muttered as she crossed her arms and glared at his back. Naruto-sama? Are you okay? Natsumi asked as she turned her attention to her angry king. Fantastic, he said in a soft but angry tone, just planning how to explain Razor coming out of the back end of try, he muttered, and a few of the girls giggled at the thought. Hearing a cough and looking up, Naruto actually smiled as he noticed the tall, violet-eyed boy staring at him. Hello, Serorg. Please take a seat, he said pleasantly while his peerage looked at the new devil in curiosity. Hey, Naruto. I see Razor is still giving you trouble. He just doesn't know when to give up, does he? After asking his question, he clicked his tongue at Naruto's head shake. Unfortunately not. If you're here, does that mean that Sigvera and Sona are here as well? He asked his cousin, who nodded and pointed over to the three girls sitting at a much larger table. Excuse me, Naruto-sama, Natsumi spoke up, gaining the two cousins' attention. Who is this? She asked respectfully and blinked in shock as Serog laughed. So this is your peerage, Naruto? They all seem very lovely. He spoke to Naruto before turning to his peerage and speaking to them. Hello. I'm Serog Bale. I'm Naruto's cousin. Chuckling at Sayuri's and Tsunade's aya of realization, he turned to Naruto and gave a little salute before heading over to Ria's table to talk to his other cousin for a little bit. As Serog's and seems nice, Natsumi spoke conversationally, which got a small smile out of Naruto. He's actually the only reason I ever look forward to coming to these types of things, Naruto said before sighing and standing up while tilting his head, groaning as his neck popped drinks. In a decently sized marble room, a 10-year-old blonde girl with shining emerald green eyes yawned as she woke up, her gaze trailing over her small room before returning to her bed. Smiling tiredly, the girl threw her blankets off of her form and swung her feet over the edge of her bed. Feeling her white carpet under her feet, the stood up and yawned once again. Stumbling across her room, she reached the desk tucked away in the corner and collapsed into her chair, her half-lidded eyes blearily staring at the desk in front of her as she grabbed out her journal and wrote in it. After finishing the page, she rubbed her eyes and stood back up. Undressing and kicking her pajamas under her bed, she grabbed out her usual white dress and put it on, nodding to herself as she looked in the mirror. Plodding down the steps of her family's two-story house, she smiled at her parents as they noticed her and smiled back. Sitting at the table, she thanked her mother for the food and after a quick prayer began to eat. After breakfast, she stood up and began walking towards the door before her mother called after her. Olivia, dear, don't forget your bag. She reminded her daughter. He facepalmed and quickly ran up to her room to grab her bag and back downstairs so that she wouldn't be late. Thanks, Mom, she called out as she ran out the front door, closing it behind her as she began heading to school. After running for a few steps, she jumped in the air and from her back, two majestic, white wings appeared and kept her afloat. Quickly taking a moment to remember where the school was, she flapped her wings and sped off in the desired direction. The flapping of the wings doesn't actually speed her up. The flapping is just for aesthetic purposes, surprisingly quickly for someone her age, though that wasn't a surprise. She didn't want to miss her first day of school after all. This is Naruto Grammarion permutation 327 of the Asgard teleportation formula. For this permutation, I have factored in the Norse whole rune on every ring and added in 4 inner layers of barrier breakers onto the main formula itself. I have also gotten rid of the Norse key rune as it has proven ineffective and has only caused the formulas to collapse on themselves faster. The now 13-year-old spoke calmly as next to him, Natsumi wrote it down in a notepad. Said 13-year-old had grown in the last 3 years and now his red spiky hair had grown to his shoulders, the same hairstyle as Minato. He wore black camo cargo pants and black combat boots. On his upper body was a long-sleeved dark red shirt. Natsumi meanwhile had taken to wearing a maid's uniform similar to Graphia's, said woman taking great pleasure in being able to teach and mold the young queen. Clapping his hands, he pulsed his magic and as he widened them a bright golden magic circle whirled into life between his palms. Placing his palms outstretched in front of him, he continued to pump magic into the magic circle as it continued to grow in size until it was slightly taller than his 157.5 centimeters, roughly 5 feet 2 inches, frame. As he continued to power the magic circle, he allowed a spark of hope, it had already lasted longer than 3/4 of the other permutations, to rise in him. Narrowing his eyes as the characters he had painstakingly calculated fully clicked in place, he pulsed his magic one final time, giving the magic circle formula the last push it needed to stay stable. Taking a moment to steady his breathing, he snapped his eyes to the formula as he heard the sound of glass breaking, and for a moment he felt his heart stop as the thought that this formula had failed as well flitted through his mind. Breathing a sigh of relief as he realized it was working and hadn't failed, he took the time to look at the formula in wonder as the inside of the formula was exchanged for a swirling mass of golden energy. Permutation 327 has successfully stabilized, the first to do so. I will now test if the portal created harms organic matter, he spoke analytically as he grabbed a potted plant which he had begun growing for this exact purpose. Walking up to the portal, he went to stick the end of the plant through it when he heard the warehouse doors open and turned around to see the other 4 members of his peerage run in. Taicho alerted us with her familiar, "You finally got one to work?" Sayuri asked curiously. "Yes. I was just about to test if it harmed organic matter with this plant," Naruto replied while holding up the potted plant. Feeling its depth and Siko sidle up on either side of him just in case something went wrong, he felt a smile tug at his lips and slowly stuck the end of the plant through. After a few moments he went to pull it back only for it to resist. Feeling a tug back, he had only a moment to blink in shock before he was pulled through the portal. said Pull, being far too fast for him to have even tried to let go of the plant before it happened. Naruto-sama! Natsumi yelled above the 4 other shouts of surprise and bolted through the slowly closing portal, the rest of the peerage following. Naruto felt his vision clear as he stumbled out of the portal and looked around quickly in shock. Seeing roughly 10 armored women with weapons pointed at him, though it could have been more, motion blur and adrenaline mixed together made analysis of situations a bitch. He jumped back and created magic circles above each of his hands and pointed them in the general directions of what he imagined to be Valkyries, embers beginning to float off said magic circles as they powered up. Cursing internally as his peerage burst through the portal, which then destabilized and collapsed behind him, he glared at the armored women as they poised themselves to attack while his peerage got between him and the women protectively. Right as things were about to come to blows, an immense power rested over the clearing and every being fell to their knees. While the women seemed to be breathing heavier and unable to move, the teenagers struggled to even stay conscious, let alone move. Glaring at the frail-looking old man with one eye who walked into the clearing, Naruto felt himself grow angrier as he walked right up to him and his peerage. Looking down at the girls who were looking at him in a mixture of fear and anger, and the single male who was glaring at him, the old man spoke. 6 children managed to open a portal into Asgard? That is impressive, he complimented them before clicking his tongue. Looking at the red-haired male, he felt a spark of familiarity. He internally smirked. Well, unfortunately, no matter how skilled you 6 are, for slipping through the barrier into our dimension, I'll have to kill you. Such a shame, you girls would have been such lookers in the future, he said with a perverted giggle before looking up as he felt a swirling mass of magic. The old man raised an eyebrow with a grin as dark red magic swirled around the teenage boy, the boy releasing his own magic to counteract the pressure of his own magic. He felt even further impressed as the boy managed to struggle to his feet even against the pressure of his own magic. The old man increased the pressure of his magic to test the boy and felt his grin grow wider as the boy fell to his knees before increasing his own magic pressure and once again struggling to his feet. Looking down at the teenage girls, he felt himself frown as the only one still conscious was the kitsune girl with 3 tails. Deciding to give the kids a break, he completely stopped his magic pressure and took great satisfaction in the surprised look on the 2 teenagers' faces. Naruto looked at the old man in confusion as his magic pressure suddenly disappeared. Looking at the old man warily, he dropped his own magic pressure before realizing that was a very stupid decision, as the artificial energy created from him releasing such high, for him, amounts of magic left him all at once and the world went black as he fainted in exhaustion. Looking at the boy in sympathy, he turned to look at the kitsune girl in the maid's outfit who had run over to the teen who just fell unconscious and cradled his body protectively while looking at him in fear. Sighing, he smiled in a grandfatherly way. I'm not going to hurt any of you brats. Though when he wakes up I am going to get the answers I want. Deal? He says forcefully and got a shaky and hasty nod from the terrified girl. Turning towards the Valkyries, some of which were still picking themselves up off the ground, he spoke. Some of you take the children and follow me. And? He began, which got some of the Valkyries to flinch at the hard tone of his voice and seriousness on his face. All of you will be receiving punishment for falling to such small pressure, he said, his face morphing from pure seriousness to a perverted grin which got blushes out of all the Valkyries and Natsumi. Grumbling in embarrassment, some of the Valkyries grabbed the teenagers while Natsumi herself carried Naruto while they walked behind the old man. Naruto groaned as he woke up a few hours later to aqua eyes hovering over his face. Blushing in embarrassment, the eyes pulled away to show a flustered-looking girl that looked around his age with a large blush on her face as she stuttered. I am supposed to tell you that Odin-sama I would like to ss speak to you, the silver-haired girl stuttered. Coughing lightly to try and push down his own blush, he nodded and swung his legs over the edge of the bed and stood up, waiting for her to lead the way. Blushing brighter, the girl led the way for Naruto, who followed her while looking at the halls around them. Arriving into a large room with a throne that the old man was currently sitting in, he saw the other members of his peerage. He saw Natsumi's ear twitch and prepared himself as the fox girl twisted on the ball of her foot and shot straight for him. Grunting as the girl tackled him into a hug, he felt his eyes soften as she cried silently into his shirt, the rest of his peerage running over to him to check on him as well. From his throne, Odin felt a small, nostalgic smile ghost over his lips as he saw the group, which he could tell greatly care for each other. Naruto Gremory, Odin spoke, said teen, snapping his now ice-cold, purple eyes at him as the girls all turned their attention to him as well. I didn't harm any of you. In return, I would like to know how a 13-year-old devil could slip past the barrier that I erected around Asgard, Odin said dangerously. The silver-haired girl looked at Odin in confusion and surprise. This was the same man that regularly spanked his Valkyrie guards as he walked past them. He was so different from the man that she had grown up knowing, so different to the man that the majority of Asgard's residents that the girl couldn't look away. Naruto, looking at the old man, remembered the pressure that he had released and subconsciously began to sweat in nervousness. I recreated a teleportation formula. He spoke clearly but softly to the elder god. I used the common devil teleportation formula and recreated it to see if it was possible to go to other dimensions with our magic. He spoke, tensing his body as Odin narrowed his eyes. The silver-haired girl looked at Naruto in shock. He had gotten past the barrier around Asgard. Even the original Devilmau hadn't been able to do that, though in all fairness they had just been using brute force to try and break through. This boy had obviously done the opposite. "Can you show me this formula?" Odin asked. Nodding, Naruto got his peerage to move back a bit as he clapped his hands together and pulsed his magic, the process of creating the portal being much easier now that he had already done it once, and that he knew it worked. Raising an eyebrow in interest, the elderly god stood up and walking over to the magic circle which was now floating in the air, not being able to create a portal because it was already in Asgard. "I see," he muttered as the glass over his missing eye glowed ominously. "This is quite advanced, especially for someone of your age. Do you realize why this works?" Odin asked the teenage boy. "As far as I can tell, it creates a door in the barrier around Asgard," he muttered, annoyed that in one look the god had managed to figure out more about his own formula than he did, and he made the bloody thing. "You aren't wrong," the old man conceded before continuing. "The use of the door rune is one of the main factors that this formula even has a chance of working, but you see the 4 barrier breaker layers you have?" Odin said, gesturing to the 4 circles attached to the edge of the golden formula. "These 4 layers in tandem with the door rune allow this formula to find the weakest point of the barrier and slip through, so to say," he explained. The silver-haired girl looked at the boy in awe. He was 2 years younger than her, and yet he had managed to create such a sophisticated spell. Naruto grumbled quietly as he let the formula fizzle away and turned to Odin as he groaned and bent back, cracking his spine with a satisfied grunt. "Well, seeing as I promised not to hurt any of you, and I would hate to kill such potential beauties," Odin said with a smirk while the 5 girls in Naruto's peerage and the silver-haired girl glared, "I will let you go. But considering that you now have a way to break into Asgard, something that could potentially be very dangerous if you gave it to other people, I will have to assign a watcher to you," Odin said conversationally as he playfully looked around before settling his eyes on the silver-haired girl behind Naruto's peerage. "Me, Odin-sama?" the girl asked in surprise. "Of course, Rossweiss dear. You've already completed all your formal Valkyrie training at the academy. And hopefully you can find a boyfriend," Odin suggested with a grin while looking pointedly at Naruto, who even while trying to stay calm and collected felt a blush creep up onto his face. "Though it was nothing compared to Rossweiss. After all, you're 15 and still haven't even tried to find a boyfriend." "I think that is absolutely dreadful," Odin said jovially while chuckling at the blushing duo and the 5 glaring girls. Allowing himself a few moments to enjoy the easygoing atmosphere he had created, it continued talking. "Until I say otherwise, Rossweiss is to be your assistant. Whether that be maid work or bodyguard work, I don't mind, but if I find out you've been abusing her, I will unleash the Valkyries on you, understand?" he warned the red-headed boy, who nodded silently with a gulp also. "She is to stay a full-blooded Valkyrie unless I say otherwise. Understand?" he said a bit more forcefully, which got a much more hasty nod. "And one final thing. If you tell, show or teach anyone about that formula, I will bring down the full might of Asgard upon you. Do I make myself clear?" Odin asked as he released his magic pressure and focused it on Naruto, who nodded his head so fast he gave himself a headache. Stopping his magic pressure, he smiled kindly at the 6 severely shaken devils and unfortunately also Rossweiss, who was covered in a light sheen of sweat as she stared at Odin in fear, and that was when he was trying to focus it all on Naruto as well. "Off you go," he said in a grandfatherly voice with a smile. Odin wouldn't admit it, but he took a great amount of pleasure in the way that every teenager scrambled around Naruto as quickly as possible, and without so much as another word the 7 disappeared in a flash of red. "I've still got it," Odin mumbled. "Now bring in the Valkyries awaiting punishment," he yelled with a perverse grin. Emerald green eyes sparkled in enthusiasm as she bounced around happily. "I can't believe that I get to go on an actual devil hunt with experienced angels," she squealed happily as she tied her blonde hair up in a ponytail while making sure that her shiny white armor was in place. She carefully checked to make sure her shin and forearm guards were in place and tightened securely, and made sure the armor on her chest and back was also tightened securely before looking in the mirror and nodding to herself. Running down the stairs of her house excitedly, and quickly saying goodbye to her mother, she slammed the doors shut and jumped in the air, her pure white angel wings extending and allowing her to fly to the rendezvous point with the experienced angels. Touching down, she grinned happily as she noticed one of her classmates, also there with the 2 angels who she knew had 4 wings each. "Claire! she said happily and hugged the girl with pure white hair and bright blue eyes who hugged her back. Olivia! You're coming as well? This is going to be so fun. We get to see and help humans and watch real angels in action. The white-haired girl squealed happily. Okay, girls. Ready? The gruff voice of one of the angels spoke. Turning to him, Olivia was the first to nod before Claire did the same, and with a wave of his hand the angel teleported them all to Earth. Looking around in wonder, the two girls giggled happily. I realize that this is your first time in the human world, but please try to stay focused, the other angel spoke, his slicked back blue hair giving him a very unique look. Chuckling nervously, Olivia attempted to stay focused as they walked through the streets of the European city. Walking through the winding streets, the two 13-year-old girls took the sights, and before Olivia noticed a homeless beggar on the sidewalk who patted his dog sadly as the mass of people walked past uncaringly. Feeling her heart reach out to the man, she walked over, managing to reach him before the angel with the slicked back hair noticed she had gone missing and, looking around, quickly located her before walking over. Olivia, what are you doing? He asked admonishingly. You shouldn't have disappeared without any warning. Olivia turned and smiled apologetically, feeling sad that even though they were standing right in front of him, the bearded man and his dog would never know thanks to the barrier the two angels had created. Turning back to the homeless man, she grabbed out a coin and went to drop it in his hat before looking at the other angel as he grabbed her wrist. What are you doing? He hissed again. Our coins are solid gold. You can't expose us like that. We could get in serious trouble, he said cautiously. Olivia looked at the older angel and felt some of her joy about this trip die as a small smolder of anger lit inside her. He's a human. We're angels. We're supposed to help humans. All humans, she rationalized and wrenched her hand free before turning to the homeless man, and before the blue-haired angel could stop her, dropped the barrier around her. The homeless man and his dog looked at the girl in surprise, having been the only ones to notice her sudden appearance due to her kneeling down, and how everyone didn't want to look at him in his pitiful state. He saw the young girl smile brightly and drop a gold coin into his hat. Looking at the coin, his eyes widened in surprise as he grabbed it out and looked at the girl. There you go, sir, she said in a melodious voice. I couldn't stand to see you or your beautiful dog in such pain, she said, and patted the dog carefully. That coin is worth quite a lot. It is solid gold, so you should be able to restart your life with it. The bearded man felt himself begin to cry as he clutched the valuable coin in his hand, and he hugged the girl tightly as he cried onto her white dress. Olivia felt her lips twist into a large smile as she hugged the man back before pulling back, the elderly man hugging his dog as he continued to cry in happiness. I'm sorry. I have to leave now, she said regretfully. Thank you, he said happily. Why, you're an angel. Do you have a name? He asked hopefully. Olivia smiled back at him and stood up. My name is Olivia, she said simply before the angel next to her put the barrier back up. To the man looking like she had simply disappeared. Now walking away from the homeless man, the blue-haired angel seethed at Olivia. How could you do that? Humans aren't meant to know angels exist. And not only did you appear and disappear right in front of him, but you gave him a solid gold coin. He roared as they arrived back with the other angel and Claire. I was helping him, Olivia shot back. You weren't supposed to help him, the gruff-speaking angel said plainly. You were supposed to watch us do our mission. You may have just gotten us in serious trouble, Olivia, he said before the four started walking again. In the back, Olivia felt that small smolder of anger growing at the words of the two older angels before taking a calming breath to stop her anger from consuming her, and followed after the two experienced angels and felt a twinge of betrayal when Claire purposefully walked with the angels and away from her. By the time they reached the rusted and weathered warehouse the devil was said to have been using as a home, Olivia had felt that small smolder spark into a small flame and flicker dauntingly at her inside her head. Ripping the rusted metal door open, the gruff-speaking angel created a light spear, his partner doing the same as a shadowed figure could be seen thanks to the light the spears exuded. Stray devil Sirzechs! The blue-haired angel yelled, knowing he had the devil's attention when the shadow figure's head snapped in their direction for crimes against the church and humanity. Olivia scowled further. We have been ordered to execute you. May the Lord have mercy on your soul, he finished with a small prayer which his partner copied before they both blasted forward. Jumping above the charging angels, Sirzechs flipped into enough light that the two teenage girls could see him and both felt like throwing up. Over half of his face and on random parts of his body was brown fur which was covered in blood as the two girls watched more fur force its way through his skin, causing blood to leak out of his skin. Olivia's attention was quickly drawn to the glowing gemstone he held in his left hand, the claws and fur he had grown making it surprisingly difficult to see it without knowing where to look. Angels, he spat in annoyance before grinning wildly. You're too late, he yelled as he held up the gemstone for all to see. Olivia blinked in confusion at the strange symbol which looked like nothing she had ever seen before, but she didn't have much time to contemplate it as the symbol disappeared from her view as Sirzechs dodged and weaved for his life to avoid the two spears of the partners who worked very well in tandem. Hissing in pain as he felt two simultaneous cuts from the light spears appear on his arm and hit, he began to chant. "Bring destruction and ash." He began before leaping off of one angel only to receive another shallow cut as he did so. "From the beginning you were there. But now you sit shackled." Seeing the gemstone begin to glow brighter in response to his words, the two angels grew more desperate in their attempts to kill him, sealed by the pure for your very nature. "Now rise again," he yelled. "Watch out," Olivia shouted in concern. Even if she was angry at them, they were still her kin. Being distracted by her yell, the two angels faltered, and with surprising accuracy the stray devil stabbed his hand through the chest of the gruff-speaking angel, who stared at Sirzechs in shock as he coughed up a globule of blood onto the stray's shoulder. Olivia felt the world grind to a halt as her heart pounded inside her ears. The effect was amplified even more as the blood of the now dead angel over the gemstone caused it to not only glow a bright red but also to release a swirling mass of demonic magic. With a dark grin, the stray devil spoke, not seeming to notice or care about the light spear heading straight for him. It was then that Olivia heard three words which would later become a major bane of her existence. "Demons of Cocytus," he screamed as the magic coming from the gemstone pulsed in reply. Sirzechs' eyes widened in shock as the blue-haired angel's light spear opened up a hole in his abdomen, almost completely destroying it. Falling to his knees, the stray devil cracked a deranged grin as the spear disappeared, causing large amounts of his blood to rush out of his body. Before any of them could stop it, Sirzechs created a teleportation formula and teleported the gemstone away. "The demons, they will rise again," he said with his last breath before the light left his eyes and he fizzled away into light particles thanks to the blue-haired angel's light spear. The blue-haired angel sank to his knees beside his friend and stared at him blankly, not even reacting when Claire nervously walked up to him. "Yes, sir?" she asked, only to get no reply. Frowning, she shook his shoulder. Once again no reply. Turning to Olivia, she spoke. "I think he's in shock," she stuttered nervously. Walking over, her movements very uncoordinated and janky as her brain struggled to keep up with any topics after the death of the angel and Sirzechs. Standing next to Claire and the two older angels, she felt tears begin to slip down her eyes, and knowing that the blue-haired angel wouldn't be able to in his current state, teleported the four of them back to heaven. A few minutes earlier, the peerage of Naruto himself and Rosweiss were all sitting on couches and chairs as they watched a movie, all of the girls sitting close to Naruto to try and draw some sort of confidence from the boy after the terrifying experience with the elderly god. To a lesser extent, Rosweiss was trying to do the same, but she still sat a respectable distance away due to a mixture of trying to stay professional and her own nervousness. Naruto chuckled a bit as the man in the movie looked into the mirror to realize that his head had been set on fire. They're watching Home Alone too, when he stiffened as he felt a pulse of dark magic from nearby. Evidently his peerage and Rosweiss had felt it as well as he felt, and saw them all tense and look in the direction of the dark feeling magic. Waiting for a moment, he felt a second pulse, and with a resigned sigh he stood up and turned to Rosweiss. "I can't stop these five from following if I tried," he said, gesturing to his peerage who now stood battle-ready. "But if you don't want to, you can stay here," he said softly. Rosweiss deliberated for a moment, and shyly shook her head. Naruto nodded and ran over to the steps, his peerage following after him. Sirzechs' gemstone struck the ground next to a ravine with a fast-flowing river at the bottom in an explosion of dirt and dust. With one final pulse of power, a twisting icy blue mass of energy formed out of the gemstone. From the icy blue energy, a giant frozen hand gripped the edge and pulled a massive ice golem out of the portal, the ice golem's eyes glowing a demonic red. The ice golem stood at well over 100 m, roughly 328 feet, tall, and swiveling its head around, it blew out a breath that froze the immediate surroundings. It had large clawed hands and thick but stubby legs with spikes all along its back and head. "This is the top layer of the underworld? Faye, absolutely pathetic. Wouldn't you agree, Soryu?" the giant ice golem asked the figure who just pulled himself out of the portal. The new figure smirked arrogantly as he surveyed the forest around him. He also had demonic red eyes and was made of ice, though he was much smaller than his supposed brother. He stood at a mere 3 m, roughly 10 feet, tall, though the very ground he stepped on froze over. He had blades coming out of his wrists which reached his elbows, and 2 large spikes came out of his knees, reaching mid-thigh. "Of course I agree, Koryu. Though we have 6 signatures incoming," he responded cockily. Floating down to the ground rather quickly was Naruto and his peerage. Touching down on the ground, the red-haired devil frowned as he felt the unknown figure's energy. It was dark, even darker than his own natural energy as a devil. "You are?" Naruto asked softly as he stared down Soryu. Your death was all, he said as he charged up his magic and charged the peerage of teenagers. Naruto didn't even blink as his death blocked his approach with a wall of ice, and Siko began trying to cut the demon to pieces with an elegant katana which flashed in the fake sunlight of the underworld in the hands of the purple-haired knight. Naruto felt a shift in the air and saw Korya's giant fist swing towards the ground. Evidently Siko had felt it as well, as she kicked off of Sorya's chest and backflipped over the ice wall, landing next to Tsunade as the giant fist swung past where she had been. A large gust of wind from Korya's fist broke the ice wall as death had made and revealed the 6 teenagers who stared at the 2 demons in silence. Tsunade. I'm going to summon Tri, you and him will handle the giant one. Siko, it's death, you two are with me. Natsumi, Sayuri, I want that portal broken. More could come through and I don't want that, Naruto ordered in a whisper which they all heard, and the 5 females shot off to do their jobs. Slamming his hands on the ground, he grinned in satisfaction as the magic circle lit up on the ground, much larger than it had been 3 years ago. The boy's dense magic allowing the spell to quickly pulse in completion, and without a second thought he blasted forward even as a single paw ripped out of the formula, and slammed into the ground hard enough to make it shake. Using the surprise of his familiar pulling itself out of the summoning circle and instantly biting down on Korya's arms and neck, he pulled 3 purple Samban out of his pants, and throwing them at Soryu. Said demon only just managed to dodge 2 of the Samban as the ground shook from the impact of Koryu and Tri hitting the ground. Hissing in pain, he pulled the 3rd Samban out of his arm, wondering how the devil boy had managed to get regular needles to pierce his ultra-dense ice body as he crushed said needle in his hand. Standing up, Koryu growled in anger and spat a cloud of ice at the annoying canine who had tried to bite him. As the canine jumped back, he lumbered to his feet only to see a small blonde-haired girl who merely smirked at his gigantic form and smashed her fist into the giant ice demon, who hunched over as he felt his stomach crack. Seeing the sea of flames heading towards him from the Cerberus, he slammed his palm into the ground, knocking everyone, even his brother, over from the force as a wall of ice just as tall as he was erupted from the ground and blocked the flames, a thick and large amount of steam floating down and covering the entire forest in their vicinity. Sorya leapt to his feet as the steam-turned fog covered the battlefield, and his eyes darted around warily. This battle had just gotten far more dangerous. His instincts screamed at him, and he ducked the katana which flew where his neck had just been, and rolling back into a handstand he blocked the ice katana of the blue-haired girl with his foot. Digging his clawed fingers into the ground, he used it as leverage to pull back with his foot, his deathless blade coming with him as the blade had gotten stuck in his foot. Sorya smirked as the blade of the purple-haired girl easily smashed the ice one and used the broken remains to heal his foot by absorbing the frozen shards. Death and Siko both had the same grin on their faces as the battle began to heat up, both jumping back as their king rushed forward and quickly engaged the smaller ice demon in hand-to-hand combat. Sliding into an upwards kick, he felt himself smile slightly as it hit, and quickly spun his other foot around to impact the demon in the chest. Using the momentary distraction created from his 2 quick blows, he grabbed 2 thick discs from his right pant pocket and threw them at the demon. As the discs flew vertically to the left and right of Sorya, he created 2 magic formulas which glowed a dark red and smashed his hands into both of them. Pulling his hands out, he gritted his teeth as the formulas broke after completing their purpose and leaving both of his hands covered in lightning. Sorya heard the sound of the 2 discs flying towards him and looked upright as the discs hit the ground on either side of him in a diagonal manner, both discs sticking diagonally upright so that they leant away from him. The 2 discs blinked an ominous red as they detected a magic core between them, and the discs opened up into many panels which emitted a high-frequency sound wave on either side of the demon, who held his hands to his head and screamed in pain as the sound waves made his entire body shake and rattle. Running towards the demon, the red-haired devil quickly struck out 3 times with his lightning-covered fists, cutting through and melting large chunks of his abdomen before jumping back as the pain from the technique became too much for him, and he was forced to shut it down. Taking a moment to shake his hands as they tingled, he smiled subtly as Natsumi and Sayuri finally managed to break the portal. Sayuri groaned as they finally broke the portal, the gemstone keeping it together crumbling into sand as they did so. Turning to her 3-tailed friend, she gestured towards the large ice demon who had gotten back up and was battling Tri and Tsunade again. The Kitsune girl looked between the 2 battles. Seeing that the 2 battle-crazed girls were keeping Naruto safe, she nodded back to Sayuri, and they both rushed towards Korya. Sorya growled in anger and breathed a blast of ice towards the 3 he was battling, growling as they avoided the blast of frozen spikes, and as he went to engage them in close combat, he turned to his left arm to see that it had turned a dark purple that was slowly creeping up to his shoulder. "You poisoned me," he hissed as he tore his arm off brutally and smiled savagely at the devils. "Too bad that isn't enough to take me down, brat," he hissed again. "Maybe this will be," a smooth voice called out as a wave of what looked like black and red-tinted flames swallowed the ice demon whole, destroying him instantly. Turning to their right, the king, Knight and pawn saw Sirzechs smiling at them before feeling the air shake as Coria screamed in pain. Looking over at said demon, Isdetha's eyes widened in shock and surprise even as her mouth stretched into a bloodthirsty smile as she saw Grafia override Coria's control of his own body and made the demon implode on itself using her own mastery of ice magic. Naruto raised an eyebrow as his peerage stood around him and Sirzechs merely looked up at Tri. "So this is your familiar?" he asked Naruto while still looking at Tri with a childish smile. "He's huge," he said with an exaggerated gesture. "I am aware," Naruto replied dryly in a low voice as his hands twitched in pain. Natsumi turned to Grafia and nodded to her, getting a nod back from the silver-haired maid. "Grafia-sensei, what are you and Lucifer-sama doing here?" she asked respectfully to her teacher. Before she could answer though, Sirzechs spoke up while looking at the remains of the gemstone used to power the portal. "We felt the release of an incredibly dark magic and came to check it out," he said seriously before smiling childishly again, "but it took so long because those old cronies kept badgering us," he said, insulting the Elder Devil Council easily. Grafia pulled his cheek harshly, getting a whine out of her husband. "You shouldn't disrespect them like that, Sirzechs-sama," she chided before turning to Natsumi while still pulling her husband's cheek. "Is 2 days from now a good day to have another lesson?" she asked respectfully. The three-tailed kitsune looked at her king hopefully and got a gentle smile and a nod in return, which made her smile brighten before she giggled as Tri bent one of his heads down to try and get a pat from Naruto, who chuckled quietly and patted the snout of his familiar. Unseen to any of the teenagers, Sirzechs frowned sadly while staring at his brother, and he quietly stood up while gently moving Grafia's hand off of his cheek, surprising the maid with the unexpectedly serious action, though she quickly caught herself and remained standing calmly beside her king. "Be careful now. We have to go. Bye, Narutan," Sirzechs yelled childishly while waving, noticing Naruto's frown and slight glare at the name and actions of the older devil. "Thank you for the assistance, Lucifer-sama," Naruto said respectfully, which got a loud laugh out of Sirzechs as a teleportation matrix lit up under him and Grafia. Once the light disappeared to show Sirzechs' office in Lilith, the capital city of the underworld, he stopped laughing and the large smile quickly dropped off his face as his body slumped. Shuffling over to his desk, he quietly sat down and began doing paperwork with a blank look, his mind replaying his only brother's reaction to him over and over again, and every time he saw it he hated it more and more. "Sirzechs-sama? Are you okay?" Grafia asked in concern. "What went wrong, Grafia-chan?" Sirzechs asked while looking up at his wife with a sad expression. "When Naruto was younger things used to be so much better. We weren't inseparable, but we at least felt like brothers," he sighed as a depressing aura cloaked his form. Grafia frowned as she noticed the aura he seemed to be exuding. It was one she knew well from during the Civil War and afterwards when Sirzechs would get flashbacks. She smiled fondly and walked over to her husband and sat on his leg before hugging him gently. "Naruto-sama is a very independent person. In 2 days, when I go to train Natsumi-san, why don't you spend time with Naruto? You always do so with Ria-sama," she murmured into his ear and smiled when he nodded slowly while in her embrace. The red-haired Mao thought about his brother sadly, even as he realized that Grafia knew more about and was closer to his brother than him. "Grafia-chan, what do you know about Naruto?" he asked as he tightened his arms around her. With a delightful smile, the maid began speaking. Naruto couldn't move. No matter how hard he tried, he wouldn't move from his spot. Looking down at his wrists and ankles, he found them shackled to the ground by thick chains. Hearing the zap of lightning, his head snapped up only to see a fully straight Ken standing in front of his immobile peerage with 2 cleavers covered in crackling lightning. Naruto's eyes widened as chains sprouted out of the ground and forced all of his peerage onto their knees while tying them up at Ken's mercy. "And Naruto-sama, please help," Natsumi cried as tears leaked down her cheeks. The devil boy's eyes widened and he struggled against the chains, trying to use his magic to break out, only for nothing to respond to his call. Sinking to his knees with tears in his eyes, he watched helpless as a cleaver went straight down through the girl's head and got stuck in her spine at chest level, blood and muscle flying out of her body as she toppled over, dead. Naruto felt all of the sound in the world disappear into silence as he watched the unmoving body of Natsumi. The world shattered like a glass window. Naruto screamed. With a startled scream, Naruto sat up and looked around his room with wide, fearful eyes. Looking around, his eyes settled on his clock as his heart rate slowed in his chest, even if it still felt like it was trying to break through his ribs and escape. 3:34 a.m. Naruto groaned and placed a palm over his face. Feeling the tears running down his face, he quickly wiped them away and scowled. "I thought I'd gotten over this," he grumbled angrily as he swung his feet over the edge of his bed and stood up, knowing he wasn't going to get any more sleep. Dressing in track pants and an oversized black t-shirt, he tiredly walked out of his room and out of the warehouse, being careful not to wake anyone else as he slipped out of the accommodations and recreation warehouse and walked into the research warehouse to try and distract himself. Turning on a light, he deftly bobbed and weaved between the large amount of technology, machines and projects before arriving at a large workbench and grabbing a custom set of black goggles from a nearby shelf. He sat down with a yawn and began working on a new machine. Sirzechs looked at the three large warehouses idly as Grafia walked into the left one, and as they walked up to the third floor, the Mao admitted that he was impressed with how homely they made the massive warehouse feel, even without the immense wealth of the Gremory clan. Sirzechs snickered as he noticed the childlike sign on the door of Naruto's Knight's Door, Sayuri if he remembered correctly. Looking back at the door, he smiled widely as Natsumi walked out, looking like a mini Grafia if she was a blonde kitsune. Natsumi smiled as he heard the telltale knock of her teacher, 3 short taps on the door, and walking up to the door she opened it before blinking in shock as she saw Sirzechs standing beside her teacher. "Lucifer-sama?" She greeted in confusion with a small bow only to get a laugh out of the man. "Grafia-chan has taught you well. I'm just here because I wanted to spend some time with Naruto. Is he the one I can sense in the middle warehouse?" he asked in a calm manner, surprising the girl who had only heard stories of his eccentricities, though that last part made her frown. "Yes, that be Naruto-sama," she answered respectfully, missing the eyebrow he raised at her frown. "Thank you, Natsumi-chan. Enjoy your training with Grafia-chan," he said with a large grin before walking back down the stairs as the two girls teleported away. Looking around as he stepped inside the warehouse, he couldn't help but whistle in appreciation at all of the machines and projects his little brother had been working on and using. Taking a moment to wander before he approached his brother, he saw the large amount of jars and broken machinery lying on a bench, though they hadn't been touched in a while if the dust was anything to go by. He continued to look at the surprisingly high-tech machines, some of which he could tell were from the human world. Finally, having decided he put it off for long enough, he grinned and hopped over to Naruto, yelping in surprise as he turned a corner, and a bright light burned his retinas. Naruto blinked out of his unresponsive state and turned around to see his older brother rubbing his eyes animatedly while whining in pain. Lifting the almost pitch-black goggles off of his eyes and onto his forehead, he raised an eyebrow as his brother turned to him, blinking rapidly, as his pupils rapidly dilated before returning to normal. "Narutan! That hurt," he whined childishly, said reaction getting a roll of Naruto's eyes, though it was only internally. "Can I help you, Lucifer-sama?" he asked dryly, the name getting the childish energy to drain from his older brother. "All right," he said wistfully. "You aren't like Ryutan," he murmured with a soft smile. "Is the seat taken?" he asked, gesturing to the stool next to Naruto. Naruto stared at his brother in shock and surprise and slowly shook his head as he gestured to the seat himself, the sudden change in his brother's attitude surprising him. "This is pretty impressive," the Mao praised his brother in a soft voice as he looked at the sound-emitting disc Naruto had been using yesterday. "I'm friends with the Juka Beelzebub, and yet I can't even tell what this can do," he continued as he tried to keep to a lower energy level than usual. "It emits high-frequency sound waves," Naruto said automatically before turning his head to look at it. "I have to make 2 new ones because you destroyed my other 2 yesterday," he accused, which got a nervous chuckle out of his brother. "My power isn't the greatest when it comes to keeping damage to a minimum," Sirzechs mumbled with an embarrassed laugh. "So why did you wake up so early?" Sirzechs asked curiously as he bounced in his seat absently. "No reason, Lucifer-sama," he said stiffly. "I just couldn't sleep," he half-lied, which got a frown out of his brother. Sirzechs, being as strong as he was and also being over 200 years old, could tell when someone was lying to him, especially a teenager. Looking over Naruto, he blinked in surprise when for a moment an image of a young red-haired man, about a decade older than Naruto, was now sat over a table with the same look, just far more traumatized. Blinking again, the image disappeared and left his 13-year-old brother staring at his unfinished creation blankly, and he smiled ruefully. "Nightmares, huh?" he commented somberly, ignoring his brother's surprised look. "I know that look," he explained before continuing. "I've seen myself with that look so often. Is sad. What was yours about?" he asked. Naruto felt himself tense up and furiously blinked away the tears even as he paled at the memories of the nightmare. "Can," he whispered simply, though his brother heard it. "I had thought I'd gotten over it. Then all of a sudden I had one this morning," he said as he turned to his brother, who had an empathetic smile on his face. "The stray," Sirzechs said as he remembered arriving in this very warehouse and seeing the damage and gore caused in the battle. "Not surprising. Though it never really goes away, not forever," he said before smiling gently at his brother as he leant forward and rested his elbows on his knees. "Did you know I still have nightmares about my first kill?" he asked his brother, who blinked in surprise and shook his head. "It happened nearly 200 years ago. For a while I was plagued by nightmares, but eventually they lessened until they stopped completely. Then they came back 6 years later. Then 14 years later. The last time I had a nightmare about that kill was 5 months ago, he admitted to his brother, who sat wide-eyed even as he continued his story. I was inconsolable. I sat in bed for 5 hours straight as Grafia comforted me. Why are you telling me this? Naruto asked in confusion. I don't want you to think that having those nightmares makes you weak. They show that you are a good person. I was also hoping we could bond a little, Sirzechs admitted sheepishly as he bowed his head ever so slightly and averted his gaze. After the incident a few days ago, I realized that I had hardly spent any time with my brother. I was hoping that maybe, just maybe, I could fix that. He asked hopefully in a soft voice, showing his brother a vulnerable side of him that not even Rias had seen. Naruto didn't know what to say. He stared at his brother for a few moments as countless words and replies flitted through his head before, slowly, a small, soft smile graced his face. The goggles are over there, Sirzechs, he said, not quite comfortable with even saying his brother's name, let alone calling him Nisan or Oniai-san. Sirzechs smiled brightly and grabbed a pair of goggles similar to Naruto's ones, happy to accept and branch his brother gave him before sitting down next to his brother, as he continued welding. Rosweiss yawned as she walked down the halls of the 3rd level of the housing warehouse to the stairs and walked down to the 1st level to their kitchen that she had been shown a few days ago. Blinking the sleep out of her eyes, she slowly seemed to gain energy, as she hummed a soft tune while making some coffee. First making her own, 2 shots of coffee, some milk and 1 sugar, before pausing and looking back and forth between the cupboard that held the cups and the coffee she had made. Sensing Naruto inside the warehouse next door, she nodded to herself. After making up her mind, she walked over and grabbed a second cup out, trying to guess how Naruto would like his coffee, and decided to simply make it with 2 shots of coffee and milk before grabbing both cups, softly blowing on hers and drinking it as she used her developing hips to open the small door on the side of the building. Walking over to the research warehouse and utilizing surprising balance and flexibility, reached up with her right foot while leaning back and used her heel to push the door handle down and pushed the door open with her foot. Righting herself, she grinned proudly as she noticed she hadn't spilt a drop of Naruto's coffee so far. Walking inside the building, she was quickly made aware of where Naruto was thanks to the loud noise of welding and the light it created. Weaving through the machines and stray bolts, gears and other such items, she quickly reached the bench only to gape at seeing not only Naruto there but also Sirzechs Lucifer. Though she wasn't surprised, she couldn't sense Sirzechs. Supposedly beings with enough power didn't even register on the senses of lesser beings. Even now, standing a scant few meters from him, she couldn't even sense him. Rosweiss blushed in embarrassment as she realized what she was about to do in front of such a powerful and influential figure, but calmed her nerves and walked over to the two with a gentle smile. Gently she placed Naruto's coffee down on the table next to him. Rosweiss smiled kindly at the somewhat startled boy and was surprised at the kind smile she got in return, both of them missing the somewhat jealous look Sirzechs sent them. "Thank you, Rosweiss," he murmured as he lifted his goggles onto his forehead, his violet orb staring into her blue-green eyes. Blushing in embarrassment, she quickly took a step back and straightened up with a small cough, oblivious to the slowly growing smirk on his older brother's face. "I didn't know how you took your coffee, so I guessed. I hope it's not too bad," she tried to say professionally, nervousness easily detected in her tone. Taking a sip of the coffee, his face scrunched up a bit, and he opened and closed his mouth a few times while rubbing his tongue on his teeth and placing the cup on the bench. Bitter was all he said, a sinking feeling beginning to swallow the poor Valkyrie girl who was afraid she had already done something wrong after her 4th day as his assistant. "Could you please grab 1 or 2 sugars for me?" he asked kindly while looking up at her. "I find regular coffee a bit too bitter without some sugar," he explained. Rosweiss brightened up immediately and nodded as she practically skipped out of the warehouse through the door she came in, obviously happy that she would be able to do her job properly. "A Valkyrie? Oh ho ho ho, how did you manage to find one, and why haven't you added her to your peerage yet?" Sirzechs asked curiously with a teasing grin. The young devil froze, his mind flashing back to the power Odin had showed him and the threats/warnings. His body freezing as he broke out into a nervous sweat and quickly flicked his goggles down and continued welding, being careful that no sparks fell in the coffee. The Mao frowned at the reaction of his brother. Having seen similar reactions before, he knew that nothing short of physical torture would get his brother to open up. While he did feel bad that his brother didn't trust him enough to tell him, he also knew that whatever caused Naruto to keep silent had terrified him, and thus had likely made him paranoid that no matter what happened or how he said it, he would be found out. The older devil just hoped that this hadn't reset the progress that he had been trying to make. "So your new assistant seems rather attractive, planning something with such an innocent girl, Naruto," Sirzechs teased and smiled when his brother blushed in embarrassment and turned to look at him incredulously. Laughing at his brother's reaction, he spoke up once more. "Don't tell me you haven't thought about it. I saw that gaze as she walked out," he teased again, being careful not to go too far so he didn't scare the boy away. "What gaze?" he asked, trying to act innocent while forcibly suppressing his blush and turning back to his work. Oh, were you not looking at the stain on her pants? The current Lucifer asked innocently as he internally grinned. Come on, Naruto, take the bait, he thought. What stain? Naruto asked in confusion before his brain could catch up and stop him. There wasn't a. He trailed off as he realized what his brother had done. The young boy unfortunately couldn't contain his blush and turned as red as his hair in embarrassment, and shook his head as he tried to get the image out of his head and focus on his work. That stupid smirk Sirzechs was wearing wasn't helping either. That was the scene that the innocent A/N, for now he, Valkyrie came back to, her master blushing dark red while his older brother laughed his head off. Walking over to them, she opened a sachet of sugar and poured it into his coffee, quickly and calmly stirring his coffee and handing it to him, raising an eyebrow when his blush lessened when he looked up at her but was still very prevalent. Thank you, Roswise, he murmured as he sipped the coffee, grinning at the taste and taking a larger sip of his coffee. Could Roswise make me a coffee as well? Sirzechs asked his brother, who out of both embarrassment and nervousness from having Sirzechs ask such a question to him, a boy who wasn't used to attention from his family, just didn't speak as he continued his work. Seeing Roswise's worried look between him and his younger brother, the mouse smiled calmingly at her, and waved his hand lazily as if telling her it's fine, and he did mean it. Just because he was acting calm and happy with his brother, he had no intention of attempting to ruin his progress in any way and trying to order his own assistant, one who wasn't even a devil, to do anything, even something as mundane as making a coffee, would lead to dire consequences. Looking down at what his brother was making, he was reminded of the parallels between his best friend and his brother. Both left him in the dust in anything even remotely science-related. He just couldn't hope to keep up. Naruto-sama, you didn't place the wire correctly. The black wire goes in the 8th socket, not the 6th, Roswise calmly said from over the boy's shoulder, seemingly just as interested in the machine as her master. The red-haired Mao looked between the two with a shocked gaze. This girl actually knew how this thing was being put together. Oh no. There's 3 of them now, Sirzechs mumbled in despair as his mind supplied him with an image of the 2 teens in front of him and a Juka creating some sort of super machine which created portals and somehow accidentally created a second Great Red. Overdramatic and exaggerated? Definitely. Possible? He wasn't willing to find out. So what's this machine supposed to do? Sirzechs asked with a large grin. Supposed to act like a small supermagnet, Naruto replied blankly, not really paying attention to the words that were said, replying off pure reflex. Sirzechs stuttered, a bead of sweat trailing down his face nervously, the previous mental image coming back with a vengeance for a brief moment. So Naruto, are you coming to the family dinner tonight? Sirzechs asked excitedly, desperately trying to distract the 2 teenagers from the machine. Roswise looked between the 2 worriedly as Naruto flinched and stopped working, easily flicking his goggles upwards as he looked towards Sirzechs with a nervous smile. Standing up, he placed his goggles on the rack and sipped his coffee to try and calm himself from his nervousness at the thought of going to the family dinner. Rain check, he mumbled nervously as his brother's eyes softened in understanding and he stood up, walking over and placing his goggles on the rack as well. Without thinking, Sirzechs gently hugged his brother only to frown and then gasp as his brother tensed in his arms before quickly and unnecessarily harshly shoving his brother away, his eyes wide in alarm and surprise. The elder devil smiled sadly as his brother finally realized what he did and smiled nervously once more. He didn't feel angry at Naruto though. He knew how distant everyone, especially his family, had been physically and emotionally. The younger boy's reaction did not surprise him in the slightest, though it did make him feel sad. It's fine, I just hope that one day you'll feel comfortable, Sirzechs said. Unfortunately, I have to go. This was fun. Hopefully we can do this again soon. The older brother suggested hopefully. Closing his eyes momentarily, he opened them again and let a small, barely noticeable smile spread over his face and nodded. With a large smile, a magic circle lit up underneath Sirzechs and began to swallow his body up, though before it got to his head he spoke with a mischievous glint in his eyes. Remember to be a good girl for your master, he said to Roswise before he completely disappeared. Both teens now stood blushing crimson, steam pouring out of Roswise's ears as thoughts of Sirzechs' implied meaning circulated throughout their minds. What a degenerate, Roswise muttered with an embarrassed blush in disapproval of Sirzechs' words. Naruto simply sighed and finished his coffee. His brother, while nice, was a complete, teasing asshole. If this is what Rias constantly had to go through, then he gladly would stay out of the limelight and let her have all of those comments. I'm going for a walk, do you mind staying back and training with the other girls? He asked his assistant politely. Said girl only nodded with a brilliant smile, not only eager to see what her allies had in terms of combat skill but also that she would be able to do something she found fun. Olivia frowned as she stood before what was basically a panel of elder angels, all of them ranging from 6 to 10 wings, though if the offense was large enough a seraph may show up every now and again. Despite knowing that her offense wasn't enough to warrant a visit from any of the seraphs, she still felt unnerved at the stares of the 12 angels above her, all sitting on polished wooden chairs that looked fit for a king, though it had nothing on the thrones of the seraphs, let alone those of the 4 seraphim. Olivia Gardvildi, a 10-winged angel, spoke, getting a nervous squeak from the girl on the practice mission. You and another young angel girl went on, Claire Absol, you not only showed yourself to a human in broad daylight, gave him one of our coins and disappeared right in front of him, you also, admittedly indirectly, caused the death of one of your guides. What do you have to say in your defense? The angel asked neutrally, careful not to fall to any of the 7 sins. He was homeless. His life was in shambles and him and his dog were going to die soon if nothing happened. I couldn't stand back and do nothing, Olivia replied heatedly. Humans do not need us meddling in their lives, a kind Samaritan would have helped them. Faith is needed in these sorts of things, Olivia, a beautiful woman said from besides the man, her 10 wings stretched out dramatically. Olivia looked flabbergasted at the woman, for the first time in her life doubting the kindness and benevolence of her own race. Faith? I have faith, but no one was helping him. I only gave him a single coin so that he could survive with his dog. Is that so bad? She asked, confused and desperate for anyone to agree with her. Patience as well as faith are needed, a second male angel intersected with an amused smile as he corrected the other angel's comment. Olivia looked between the 12 angels, seeing them all in agreement with each other. She felt her anger growing, her wings darkening a single shade for only the briefest moment, not even becoming a light gray. It was so insignificant, but the 12 caught it easily, the single moment being easily enough time to watch the minute change in color. What was that? The woman from before asked, her features having lost their kindness and were now hardened into stone. Olivia, having not realized what happened, felt her anger dissipate as she looked between the 12 angels in confusion. You don't even know what just happened, another woman claimed in surprise, her 6 wings curling inwards slightly. It appears that she doesn't. The head angel spoke once more, his 10 wings stretching out as far as they could go as he leveled an ice-cold gaze on Olivia, freezing the girl in her spot. Olivia felt her body freeze in fear as the old angel leveled his gaze on her, her entire body feeling like it was just dunked in sub-zero ice as she paled. Olivia Gardvild, are you aware that just for a moment your wings darkened? He asked seriously. A minute shake of the girl's head was his reply. I realize the Academy has yet to go over this in detail, but due to the potential threat of you turning into a fallen. He paused as he took a breath. God has decreed that you wear this as a warning to those around you of the danger you pose, he said, holding up a white collar. The 13-year-old girl felt her world shatter around her. A fallen collar? No! That was practically worse than actually being a fallen. Even without having gone over it in explicit detail in class, every angel was taught the significance of someone wearing a fallen collar. It was a warning to angels around them. The darker the color of the collar turned, the closer to becoming a fallen they were. Wearing one meant that practically everyone distanced themselves from you. It was torture to even be threatened to wear one. Olivia knew that if she didn't wear it, her punishment would be far worse. With a choked sob, she nodded her head and the collar was placed around her neck, the leather-like material turning from pure white to a slightly darker shade, similar to a shade of cream. Some of the elder angels felt bad for the now sobbing girl who sank to the ground, though even the ones that felt sorry for her believed that she deserved this. It was God's will, not only for her actions on the mission today but also for even considering falling. Blank green eyes stared despondently at the polished door of her house as she lazily pushed it open. Walking inside, she quietly closed the door behind her. She looked up just in time to see the happy expressions of her parents at seeing her, morph into expressions of shock and fear at seeing the collar. She saw her father tense, and her mother reflexively take a step back in fear. A pang of betrayal flashed through her as her blank, almost uncaring green eyes bored into those of her parents. They were supposed to love her unconditionally, right? Isn't that a parent's job, that even if their child was to become a criminal of the highest caliber they would still love them? Looking at her parents now, she didn't see her 2 loving parents, she saw 2 scared angels, and she almost snorted in humor. To think that a simple collar was enough to make even the strongest angel fearful was strangely amusing to the broken girl. Idly, a thought made itself known in her head. They'd been brainwashed pretty well, she thought, having seen the same reaction from at least 50 angels on her way home. It seemed to be an ingrained response. She actually did snort in amusement when her mother gasped in horror and his father took in a quick breath. Her collar must have darkened slightly. I'm home, she said blankly as she turned away from them and began walking up the stairs of her house to her room, her feet barely leaving the ground due to her current lack of energy. Reaching her room, she lazily pushed her door open and closed it with her foot as she walked into her safe haven, even if she hadn't realized it yet, and collapsed on her bed, tears welling up in her eyes once again as she cried into a pillow. Olivia woke blearily to the sound of something tapping on glass. Looking around, she saw a hand tapping on her window and lazily swung herself out of bed and walked around the construct to her window. Looking out her window, she saw an angel roughly 20 years older tapping on her window with a kind smile on his face. The one glaring difference between this angel and any other was a gray collar around her neck. Raising an eyebrow, she opened her window and took a cautious step back as the angel hopped into her room. "Hi, Olivia," the girl greeted politely with a small curtsy of her white skirt. "How do you know my name?" Olivia asked warily, her recent collaring having robbed her of some, definitely not all, but some of her naivety. "Who hasn't by now?" she asked rhetorically in return. "I'm a part of a group of angels similar to you, and I came to bring you to a meeting we're having. Would you like to come?" The female angel asked kindly to the young girl, who after a moment's hesitation nodded with the briefest of smiles. Both jumping out of her window and taking flight, they entered the outskirts of the residential area that Olivia lived in and into houses that were not only taller but also more packed together, showing the growth in humanity's population over time. Reaching a point, Olivia yelped in surprise as her partner suddenly dived straight down and quickly followed after her. Straightening out as the ground of the alley quickly drew nearer, she flapped her wings once and twirled, blinking as some dust got in her eyes and accidentally flapped too hard, sending her straight into the wall of a building next to her. Looking behind her, the elder girl raised an eyebrow in surprise and helped the teenager to her feet, giggling lightly at the girl's pained groan as her eyes swirled before she blinked rapidly and shook her head to try and clear it of the cobwebs. Smiling towards the older angel, she followed after her as they approached the entrance to a fairly large house and waited patiently after the angel girl knocked on the door. As the door opened, Olivia took her time to look the man over who opened the door. He had brown hair and brown eyes, fairly average looking, and probably wouldn't even be noticed by the vast majority of angels if it weren't for the nearly pitch-black collar around his neck. "Ah, Diane! So nice to see you brought young Olivia here. Welcome, young one," he greeted, his age showing in his words as he stepped aside and opened the door further, allowing the two girls to enter. Walking inside, Olivia was reminded of her own home. The sense of style in the furniture and aesthetics were pretty similar but not quite the same, and it had the same homey feeling as her house on any day other than today. Walking through the corridor, she blinked in shock at the 20 or so angels that were already there talking amicably amongst themselves. "Ladies, gentlemen, Diane has brought Olivia to us as promised. Let's make her feel at home," the man exclaimed, and got various shouts of support as some of them walked over to Olivia. One by one, as all of the collared angels expressed their condolences and gave sympathetic words and actions, she felt tears prickling at her eyes once more and looked up when she felt two arms wrapped around her. Seeing that Diane was the one hugging her, she tearfully blinked in confusion and got a sad smile from the woman. "I can't imagine how this feels for you, Olivia. All of us were collared after we were over 80 years old. And you've been collared at 13, Diane trailed off as she herself began to cry. Olivia couldn't handle it anymore and, turning in the woman's arms, wrapped her own around her and began to cry loudly. Everyone looked on in sympathy at the two girls, but more specifically Olivia. After a few moments, the man who owned the house stepped forward and put a comforting hand on Olivia's shoulder. "I understand that this must be tough on you. I couldn't imagine it being easy in any stretch of the imagination. But know that you have us, and likely most other collared angels, to look to for comfort. We will always welcome you with open arms. Sadly, you are one of us now," he said, and got a teary-eyed nod and sincere, but tiny, smile in return as the two girls separated. "Hey, are you guys some sort of secret organization?" she asked innocently, only to get a small round of chuckles. "No," the man said while laughing, "nothing so insidious or secret. We are merely a group of collared angels who meet together every 2 or so weeks. My name is Peter, by the way." Peter introduced himself with a large smile. Olivia, seeing his smile, couldn't help but smile herself, and seeing this, Peter ruffled her hair, getting a childish pout from the girl. "It's good to see that even after all this you still have that innocent childlike side of you. I was worried it might have been destroyed or buried too far down," he said while breathing out a sigh of relief. "Speaking of children, you have school tomorrow, don't you?" Diane asked, poor Olivia freezing in fear. They wouldn't act any different, would they?" she asked hopefully. "I mean, my collar can still be considered bright white," she said, pointing at her own collar, which by almost any standard was still a very bright white. "I'm sorry, Olivia," Peter apologized with a grim look, "but they have all been taught just like you have. The only difference is that you actually have a collar. They will avoid you like a disease. I'm sorry that such a young girl has to go through this," he said regretfully, looking up at her as her hand rested on his shoulder. Maybe there might be one or two that will be nice, she said hopefully, even through the sad smile on her face. And is not your fault, Peter. She tried not to cry once again, and continued smiling. Peter merely smiled in return and stood up, grabbing her hand and beginning to lead her around to all of the other angels. Let's introduce you to our little group, shall we? He said with a cheeky grin which managed to successfully get a giggle out of the girl. Naruto walked calmly through the forest surrounding his warehouses as he let his mind whirl and thought about his family and his peerage. Idly he chucked a pebble up and down in his palm while walking. Just as he was about to head back, though, he felt a pulse of familiar dark magic, and with a start he flew towards it. Arriving at an icy blue portal, he narrowed his eyes while reflexively holding onto the pebble as a man walked through, looking completely human if it wasn't for the blue skin and claw fingers made of ice. A devil? Huh, you're the species that took over for us? Pathetic, the demon spat. Shooting forward, the teenage devil threw the pebble in his hand to distract the demon, thick, red energy coating the pebble, allowing it to actually be a threat. Of course his aim was far from perfect, but even then if the demon didn't move it would still hit his shoulder and likely do a large amount of damage. The demon scoffed and knocked the pebble away as the portal closed behind him. The momentary lapse in concentration as the demon's eyes tracked the pebble allowed Naruto to not only gain a solid kick to the demon's chest but also pulse his magic as he did so, knowing that at the very least Sayuri would be able to sense it. Said magic pulse came in a bastardish version of Tsunade's own technique that she hadn't even mastered yet, so even if it wasn't even a 1/4 of her strength, it was still enough to send the demon sprawling like a ragdoll before he caught himself and landing with a solid thunk as his feet hit a thick tree. Keeping his purple eyes trained on the demon, he was ready when the blue-skinned male kicked off the tree and was quickly in his face and managed to catch his strike by the wrist, the dangerously sharp icicle fingers being uncomfortably close to his face. Why are you here? Naruto questioned as he caught the demon's other hand mid-strike and the two entered a power struggle. I thought you needed those runic gemstones to leave wherever you come from, he questioned as he struggled against the demon's superior physical prowess. Oh dear little devil, we only needed the gemstone coated in angel's blood because it broke the barrier between our section of Cocytus and the dimension it was in, the demon revealed arrogantly, his lips twisting into a deranged smile at the small spark of fear he saw in the teenager's face. It's not the overworld like we expected, but I'm sure the generals would love to take back our rightful home from you fakers, the demon hissed. Naruto glared in anger and feeling a fast approaching blip on his senses he rolled backwards, pulling the demon with him and kicked him in the stomach using Tsunade's technique again, hissing in pain as he mistimed the output of power and injured his leg, blood beginning to slowly stain his pants as the demon flew in the air. Just as the demon was about to taunt his opponent, his senses screamed, but in the air he could do nothing and had to watch as a vicious clawed strike knocked him out of the air and into the ground in a large explosion of dust. Naruto grinned painfully and rolled onto his feet, his weight shifting onto his left leg as Sayuri's concerned silver eyes filled his vision. With a caring smile he looked at her and nodded his head in thanks before the smile dropped from his face and the caring spark in his eyes was snuffed out like a flame as the demon launched himself at Sayuri in fury. Pushing the girl aside, he allowed his anger the briefest moment to surface, and in an instant he found himself in the air, almost parallel to the ground, over the demon's body which was still speeding towards Sayuri. His magic swirled around him and his eyes glowed softly at the rage and magic flowing through them, his senses, reflexes and body at an all-time high as above his right hand a small but extremely hot fireball appeared in an instant, an overpowered matrix appearing and disappearing so fast he normally would have missed it. Stay away, he thought angrily as he twisted his body to begin his attack. With a loud bang the fireball struck the demon's back and forced all of his forward momentum straight down into the ground, which cracked and cratered under the assault of the technique. From my peerage! He mentally yelled as the fireball destabilized and exploding in a large column of fire. Imagine the scene in the Minato vs. Obito/Tobi fight where Minato uses Rasengan on Obito. Rolling very quickly along the rough ground he groaned in pain as Sayuri caught him before he impacted a tree. Not only had the quick movements made his leg worse, but he also had second and third degree burns up his right arm. Hurts, he mumbled as Sayuri helps him stand up, his left arm wrapped around her shoulder. I'm not surprised, she chuckled, that was pretty cool though, so Taishu, didn't know you could move that fast, she complimented him while staring at the dust cloud calculatingly. Neither did I, he chuckled weakling before wincing in pain. As the dust cloud started to wane, the rest of his peerage, minus Natsumi, and Rosweiss flew down, landing around the duo. Tsunade and Rosweiss gasping at the injuries and Siko and his death glaring dangerously at the dust cloud. Tsunade looked at the burns and blood-soaked pant leg and a feeling of uselessness washed over her. Sure, she could fight in hand-to-hand combat pretty well, and her healing was decent, but she had focused far more on combat since she became a devil, almost completely forgetting about her medicinal practices in the euphoria of developing her super strength technique. But looking at Naruto now, she wished that she had the means to help him. Looking over his injuries, she could tell that he would be fine. To some devils, not including Phoenixes, they're cheaters, these sorts of wounds are superficial at best. Even so, she cursed her inability at being able to help relieve his pain. As the dust cleared, the blue-skinned demon stood dizzily to his feet, blue blood leaking out of the wound on his back, which he knew would leave a large scar if he managed to make it out of this fight alive. His previous arrogance now destroyed. If one devil, a teenager at that, managed to do this to him, what could an older one do? Or multiple ones? He had to report this to his superiors. The peerage's eyes all snapped towards the demon as a portal whirled into life behind him, Naruto's eyes glinting as his mind raced to memorize the formula that appeared, and he slowly began to inch towards it while holding his abdomen with one arm. And my superiors will know of this. What is your name? The demon asked, the pain causing his speech to come out stuttered. And that of your group? He added in. Naruto, the boy responded, and my group is called. He trailed off, his mind desperately looking for a name, trying to keep the knowledge of peerages away from the demons, before his eyes caught the portal. For some strange reason, to Naruto, the portal in the middle of the dust seemed to look like a sun in the clouds in the early morning. With a determined glare at the demon, he spoke only a single word. Akatsuki? Is he still working on it? Sayuri asked the blonde kitsune girl next to her, who was watching their king messing around with magic circle formulae. Yes. Naruto-sama says that the teleportation formula that the demon used won't leave his head. He's been having dreams around it. I don't think he's going to be able to properly rest until he figures out the part of the formula that he wasn't able to memorize, Natsumi said in worry, gently biting her finger as she stared at her king. Well, we just got a message from Lord Gremory's familiar. Do you want to hand it to Sotaisha? Sayuri asked the fox girl teasingly, said girl blushing and nodding quickly, snatching the letter out of the half-wolf spirit's hand. As she walked over, she smiled fondly as she saw Naruto chew on a pencil idly in thought as he looked at the magic circle on the computer screen in front of him, using a specially made program he created him which allows him to artificially create magic circles to test. As she reached him, her fond smile lessened slightly at the annoyed twinkle in his eye, but she pushed that aside for the moment. Naruto-sama, she began respectfully, snapping him out of his frustration-induced focus as he looked up at her curiously, attempting his best to try and look at her without his frustration showing. Lord Gremory has sent this letter for you, she said, handing him the letter. Grabbing the letter curiously, he broke the wax seal and opened it. Reading through the letter quickly, he scowled minutely, barely enough for someone not trained or with supernatural eyesight to see. Father is holding a family dinner tonight, he explained to Natsumi, who nodded thoughtfully, which means I have to either deal with father, who rarely speaks to me, mother, who hasn't spoken to me since the Phoenix Ball 3 years ago, and Rias, who just like mother holds a grudge because of Ken. He spat angrily at the mention of the boy before trying to control himself or stay here and slowly go insane trying to figure out the last component of this formula, he said slightly humorously, Natsumi, letting out a quiet giggle at her king's attempt at humor. I think that you should go, Naruto-sama. Maybe try to bridge relations with your family? She suggested optimistically with a smile, while grabbing the pencil out of his hand gently and placing it on the table. Naruto opened his mouth to speak before closing it slightly and looking downwards. I don't want to go, I don't like it there. Rias and mother always stare at me nastily. Father and Lucifer S.A. Sirzechs never speak to me. I feel uncomfortable. It doesn't feel nice, he trailed off, internally wincing at how pathetic he must have sounded. The 13-year-old boy tensed in shock as he felt the soft, feminine arms wrap around his neck and pull his head gently against her chest as she climbed up and sat on his leg while hugging his head to her chest softly, her fingers idly running through his blood-red hair as she began to speak. It's okay, Naruto-sama. I don't blame you, but I still think you should go, at least to try and bond a little bit more with Sirzechs-sama. I heard that he spent some time with you while I trained with Grafia-sensei, she murmured into his ear, gently stroking his head as she hugged him. Come with me? He murmured vulnerably, looking up at his queen, letting her see a side of him that he hadn't shown since the Ken incident. Natsumi smiled gently at him and closed her eyes as his smile grew, so happy that he trusted her enough to not only show this side of him again, but also to ask her to come with him and support him at a dinner with his blood family. Of course, Naruto-sama, she chirped happily. Of course, Natsumi knew that the dinner would be awkward. There was no way that her king would have that sort of reaction otherwise. Though even her worst expectations only just seemed to meet the reality of the situation. She had to forcibly stop herself from nervously shuffling on the spot behind her king, who, though he was hiding it incredibly well, the only reason she could tell was because she knew him so well, looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him up and grind him into paste just so he wouldn't have to deal with the stairs anymore. At one head of the table was Theodicus, who, though he didn't keep a consistent gaze on his son, flicked his eyes in the boy's direction far too often and far too long for either of the teens' comfort. Likewise was Sirzechs, who they could tell was genuinely trying to keep the family's attention off of the boy and his queen and not look at either of them too much, and even though Naruto didn't voice it, he was very thankful for his attempts. The real issue though came from the two females of the family. Ria sat to Naruto's right, on the same side of the table as him, and kept her narrowed eyes on the boy at all times unless directly addressed by one of her family members. The 13-year-old boy could have sworn he saw flickers of her power of destruction manifest around the closest to him far more than once. Finally, at the other head of the table was his mother, Vanillana Gremory, who like Rias was glaring at him, thankfully not as much or as intensely. Of course Naruto and Natsumi knew why they, mostly Naruto though, were getting these looks. Things had been like this ever since he had killed Ken. Rias, and to a slightly lesser extent Vanillana, never agreed with his decision, and Naruto had often heard his mother speaking to his father about other choices he could have taken. He wouldn't lie to himself. The lack of support from the two girls on what had to this point in his life been the hardest decision he had ever made hurt on a level that surprised him. The betrayal he felt like a dagger constantly pinned in his back. Over the last 3 years the pain had lessened, but whenever he was around them he was always reminded of it. So Naruto Sirzechs began with a polite smile. "How are your research projects?" he asked, trying to strike up conversation with his youngest son. "Progressing at an exceptional rate," he answered quickly, and used to having an ordinary conversation with his family, any of them. Sirzechs replied, not sure how to respond to the short reply. "Wonderful." Natsumi decided to let Naruto take a breather and spoke up. "Though the power system Naruto-sama started designing 5 months ago has seemed to reach a plateau, he hasn't been able to find a suitable stabilizer for the energy core. Raswise-san has suggested devil tungsten on multiple occasions in the last few days." Natsumi supplied helpfully to his father, said man, seeming to perk up at the news. "And as I've told her every time," Naruto began evenly as he turned to look back at his queen, "for the small-scale prototypes I've created so far, devil tungsten would work to an acceptable level, but for a larger model, which I plan to create, it cannot keep up with the increase in output from the larger energy core," he replied, not noticing the surprised looks from his family. Even if Rias was hidden under a thick layer of anger. "Maybe human diamond?" she suggested helpfully, now caught up in the conversation with her king. "It wouldn't work. I need something which can conduct electricity," he shot back quickly, now just as absorbed in the conversation as Natsumi, completely forgetting about his family. The four devils watched in fascination/disgust. Rias, as Natsumi would suggest materials that Naruto would shoot down for various reasons. Sirzechs smiled gently, unseen to everyone, at seeing how comfortable his brother was around Natsumi. Sirzechs meanwhile smiled slightly and coughed to catch the teen's attention, nearly letting a small chuckle escape when he noticed the two freeze in embarrassment at the conversation they had gotten sucked into. Taking the information that he had gathered, the patriarch of the Gremory family spoke once again, now slightly more confident that he had found a more comfortable topic for his socially stunted son. "So Naruto, I assume that with such an interest in inventions and research that you would aspire for the Beelzebub title?" he asked, genuinely curious at his son's future goals. Naruto shrunk into himself ever so minutely at the attention and question before answering in a soft tone. "I'm not really sure what my end goal is right now. But if I was to become a Mao, I'd go for the Leviathan or Beelzebub position. I can't decide," he added on quickly as he noticed the confused looks the four sent him. "Beelzebub would be better. After all, who would agree to ally themselves with a Mao that kills his own peerage in cold blood?" Ria spat venomously in a low tone so that only her twin brother and Natsumi could hear. Naruto felt his eyes hardening as he narrowed his eyes back at his sister, already knowing that behind him, Natsumi was doing the same, probably to a greater extent though. "Why the Leviathan position?" Sirzechs asked, genuinely curious. "I like to meet people from other religions and factions," he answered slowly. "I enjoy learning about our differences." He finished lamely, trying to finish talking as quickly as possible now. "Interesting, I honestly thought you would go for the Lucifer position." Sirzechs laughed. "How about you, Rias dear? Are you interested in any Mao position?" Vanillana asked her daughter pleasantly. "I'd definitely go for the Lucifer position," Rias said enthusiastically, her attitude doing a complete 180 when not focusing on Naruto. "I mean, being Lucifer is so cool. Being the leader of all of the devils sounds like so much fun." "You poor innocent, naive fool," Sirzechs thought spitefully while laughing at his sister's enthusiasm. "The paperwork you do as a Lucifer knows no bounds. But go ahead, Rias-tan, take my position from me. Suffer as I have suffered while I enjoy endless, paperwork-free relaxation time," he thought sinisterly before snapping out of it and enjoying his sister's happiness and energy. As the conversation moved to a different topic, Naruto and Natsumi quickly drifted into the background due to a lack of things to say. Turning to Natsumi, the 13-year-old boy decided to pass time by talking to his queen. "So Natsumi, What are the rest of the girls up to? He asked the girl curiously, knowing that she regularly made sure to know what the girls were working on. Well, this Death-san and Siko-san are both working on their sword skills by battling each other. I believe Tsunade-san has buried herself in books in her room trying to memorize the anatomy of a devil. Natsumi giggled slightly after she said that. Having seen the girl earlier that day sitting in the middle of her room surrounded by piles of medical books, Sayuri-chan is working on her hand-to-hand skills with Roswise-san as well, the Kitsune girl answered. Naruto nodded and leant back into his chair as he thought for a moment before tilting his head to look at Natsumi. Natsumi, what do you think about those demons? He asked curiously, unfortunately a bit loudly as his older brother managed to hear the words and quickly started paying attention to the conversation. I think that right now they aren't much of a problem, but there could be much stronger ones. Naruto-sama, can I ask you a question? She mumbled, getting a raised eyebrow from him as he hesitantly nodded, quickly making sure that none of his family was listening in, unfortunately not realizing that his brother was that demon last week. Why did you give it your name? And give it a name for your peerage? She asked curiously. I don't know. I wasn't thinking, he admitted, embarrassed. I was hurt, and I wasn't thinking properly, and all I thought was that maybe if I give them a name they would focus on us instead of devils as a whole, and I didn't want them finding out about peerages, so I named us like a group. And he trailed off after his mumbled admission and looked at his queen shyly. I just wasn't thinking, he finished off lamely. Natsumi couldn't help it and giggled as her king finished his explanation. It's fine, Naruto-sama. I'm just glad you aren't hurt, she said, and snickered internally at the slight blush she got out of him before a mischievous glint befitting a kitsune twinkled in her eyes. So, if we are a group, do we get a uniform? She asked as Naruto slowly just placed his face in his palm while exhaling, his brother internally laughing, even while planning on doing some background checks using his own peerage on what he heard from their conversation. In the center of a bustling city sat a massive bonfire, easily 500 meters, 1,640 feet roughly, in diameter. Despite its size and the fact that it was white hot in its intensity, everything around it was perfectly intact, and people walked next to it without harm. From the middle of the fire, a large pillar of red-hot air rose into the sky before turning into an enormous dome that made up the sky as far as the eye could see. At the epicenter of the massive bonfire sat a vaguely humanoid figure on a throne. Curled horns on its head that looked sharper than spears, and its massive bodybuilder-type frame sitting at 10 m, roughly 33 feet, gave it an intimidating look, even without the help of its eternally glowing eyes, blood-red skin, and the flames that licked at its body constantly. Atop the roof of a large tower close to the bonfire stood a humanoid figure with folded wings on his back made of pure dirt and rock. Over the man's 1.8 m, roughly 5 feet 11 inches, frame rested a coat not too different from the color of the figure inside the fire. On the back, a gold embroidery of General 5 could be seen. Turning his head slightly as a grotesque black creature that had 3 heads, 12 limbs, and 6 wings landed behind him. Sir, the demon sent to patrol the underworld returned. He has already been executed for not achieving any of his objectives, but the creature was cut off as an extreme amount of force suddenly weighed down on it, the muscular creature instantly falling to its knees as the man narrowed his eyes at the creature. That is a waste of resources. That demon could have one day risen to captain level. If he was lucky, he could rise to colonel. Surely you must know how I abhor such a waste. His gentle baritone voice came out calmly, even with it holding no detectable malice whatsoever. The creature still felt as if his life hung on his next few sentences. Oh, of course, General, but the demon discovered that the devils have claimed our spot as the rulers of the underworld. He also claims to have found why he has been the only scout so far to return, a group of devils apparently. Named Akatsuki, one of the 3 heads, hurriedly spoke in an attempt to stay alive. Slowly the pressure lifted until it was completely gone, allowing the creature to stand again as the general returned his gaze to the bonfire that had allowed the demon race to survive the absolute cold of Cocytus for the 600 years since their sealing. Despite the hole broken in the barrier, it will still be some time before even a captain-class demon can go through, for now I want the strongest frozen sent through the portal. There is a possibility that sending the strongest through continually could widen the hole made in the barrier faster, he ordered, partially speaking to himself as he talked, and I want information on this Akatsuki. A group of devils such as them could be hazardous to our escape, he added on as the creature nodded hurriedly, and quickly flew away. The man continued to stare at the fire calmly and let the white flames entrance him almost as they flickered back and forth in a massive roiling mess of flames. Calmly inhaling, the man disappeared, no evidence being left that he had ever been there. That night Naruto found himself calmly holding a wooden katana in his right hand, which he pointed at his 2 knights who did the same. Ready, Naruto-sama? Siko asked respectfully as she stood in a picture-perfect kendo stance. I hope you do well, Naruto-sama. It has been a while since you last did sword training with us, his death commented with a grin at the thought of experiencing her king's power once again. Naruto merely nodded in response to both of the girl's words and shot forward, the 2 swordswomen doing the same. Meeting about halfway, the young teen hopped upwards to avoid the low slice of Isthetha's wooden katana and with a single hand blocked Zico's blow, said blow sending him flying backwards thanks to having no solid purchase to hold his ground having jumped in the air. Allowing his body to roll backwards along the ground instead of flipping and landing on his feet, he smiled as a preemptive joint attack from the two girls missed, and as he rolled he placed a single palm on the ground and with a grunt pushed himself off of the ground and into the air as his body continued to flip backwards. Appearing on either side of him were the two girls, both showing their skill and teamwork as two horizontal strikes were aimed at him. Reaching out with his sword and leg, he hooked his sword under Zico's and flicked hers up while pushing Isthetha's down with his foot and kicking off of Isthetha's sword ever so slightly so that the two girls collided beneath him, which allowed him to flip and land on his feet, stumbling slightly as he landed from the complex maneuver. Staring at the two girls who untangled themselves and stood up, he was very glad that they were only using blunt wooden swords, as a sharp metal one likely would have ended up with him missing a foot if he tried that move. From the sidelines, Natsumi occasionally watched with a smile, while writing something down in a notebook, her three tails idly waving behind her as she wrote. Smiling as she heard quiet footsteps behind her, she turned around to see Roswise staring at her with a pleasant smile. "Hello, Natsumi-san," she greeted as she walked up next to the Kitsune girl while trying to subtly read what was in the notebook. "Hello, Roswise-san. If you wanted to see what is in my notebook, you could always ask," she responded with the faintest ghost of a smirk playing across her lips. Blushing in embarrassment, the Valkyrie chuckled nervously and shuffled on the spot while clasping her hands in front of her. "May I be allowed to see what's in your notebook?" she asked respectfully with a slight bow. The fox devil couldn't help it, and a small giggle escaped her lips as she tried to suppress the laughter while holding the notebook out to her. "Roswise-san, while I do want Naruto-sama's peerage members to be respectful in public, in private you can be a little more relaxed. I don't mind," she explained to the Valkyrie, who nodded with an embarrassed laugh and carefully took the notebook. Flicking through the pages, the Valkyrie raised an eyebrow at the sketches of various chess pieces with arrows, which she guessed was meant to mean movements, possibly teams/peerage formations. As she continued flicking through, she smiled at how thorough the queen of her master's peerage was when it came to helping organize his peerage. Reaching the last few pages, she was a bunch of names with species and chess pieces written next to them. "Natsumi-san?" she asked politely, continuing when the girl turned her attention to the Valkyrie. "These last few pages, are they possible members for Naruto-sama's peerage?" Natsumi nodded enthusiastically as she looked at the book that Roswise was holding. "Yep. Of course Naruto-sama has the last say, but I, and occasionally Sayuri-chan, try to help find potential members from all races. You never know where a diamond in the rough might appear," she said knowledgeably, something she may or may not have picked up from Graphia during their lessons. "It's very extensive. For some of them you've really done your research," she praised the girl, who subtly preened under the compliments. "Though why are all of them female?" The Valkyrie trailed off in confusion. Natsumi's preening attitude quickly vanished and her posture straightened a little. Even with the straightened posture, the Valkyrie could have sworn that the girl looked like she had a large weight on her shoulders. "When Naruto-sama, I and Sayuri-chan were all 10, there was a fourth member of our peerage. A fairly ordinary-looking boy named Ken. He had a sacred gear that allowed him to channel lightning through nearly any substance he could touch. He never agreed with Naruto-sama resurrecting him, and eventually it got to the point where he tried to kill Naruto-sama. Natsumi desperately used her lessons from Graphia to control her emotions so that she wouldn't start crying. Naruto-sama, and I fought him as he turned into a stray, and Naruto-sama managed to kill him. Ever since then I've never even considered a single male peerage member. We let one into our peerage, and he tried to kill my king. I won't allow that to happen ever again," she said resolutely, a determined fire burning in her eyes which surprised the Valkyrie in its intensity. "Oh," Roswise said simply, "not having known about Ken until now, I guess I can see your point of view," she said uncertainly. "I know that my point of view isn't easy to empathize with, but it hasn't led me wrong so far," Natsumi replied with a grin. Roswise couldn't help but giggle at the comment, and continued to go back and forth between the pages of the notebook. "Natsumi-san," she began while flicking through the pages, "why do you care so much for Naruto-sama? I'm just curious about where such loyalty and devotion came from," she asked before explaining her reasons for asking. Natsumi simply just smiled fondly as she tilted her head up and watched her king fight two of her sisters, the boy now covered in very small amounts of blood and bruises from the fight against the tag team. "When Lucifer-sama first brought me to Naruto-sama, I was scared, nervous, and confused. An amazing Mao like him had personally chosen me to be a piece for his younger brother's peerage. It felt like a dream from the life I had before. When I first saw Naruto-sama, he was wearing such casual clothes, his shirt even had a large ink stain on the collar, that I didn't know how to react, so I went for polite. Even if it came out more terrified than polite," Natsumi recalled with a small giggle. "Imagine my surprise when Naruto-sama pulls out a queen piece to resurrect me with. Me, a single-tailed kitsune with clothes that could nearly be considered rags and dirt and mud covering me. I decided that even for that action alone I would try to be the very best queen possible, to try and prove that he was correct in using such a piece on me. As time went on, I slowly started developing feelings that went above gratitude. It was after the incident that those feelings really blossomed and began to grow into what you see today, she explained warmly before turning to Ross Weiss. The kitsune didn't know whether to be touched or slightly disturbed at the glassy-eyed Valkyrie who looked ready to start bawling her eyes out at any moment. That was so sweet, Natsumi-san. Just like two characters from my favorite books, she compared as she hugged the notebook to her chest. I'm glad you think so, Natsumi replied in a sing-song voice with a large smile. A loud explosion of dust drew their attention back to the spar and Natsumi clicked her tongue. Oh dear, it appears magic is now being used. Moving around a series of ice spikes, the young devil boy had to quickly bend backwards to dodge the lightning-covered wooden katana which flew past where his neck had previously been before turning his backwards bend into a backflip as the ground underneath him turned into a large ice spike with a thankfully dulled, but still painful, edge. Flipping in the air quickly, he created a magic circle which spat out a geyser of water at the incoming Seiko, who much like his death was grinning widely with wide eyes and pupils the size of pinpricks. After making sure the water did hit the purple-haired knight, he stopped the spell as his water started turning to ice and hit the ground on his feet, sliding to a stop as the final dredges of his midair geyser turned to pure ice. Icy blue eyes stared into violet-purple eyes with a bloodlust which Naruto had long grown accustomed to. Flicking his eyes momentarily to the left, he saw another set of blue eyes, though darker than Estetha's, staring at him with an equal if not greater amount of bloodlust. Naruto sighed while keeping his eyes trained on Seiko and Estetha, far too used to them taking pot shots whenever he did so.